Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a regularly scheduled council meeting for September 23rd. My name is Kevin Murdoch. I'm the mayor of Oak Bay. I think I know most of you in the room anyway. And welcome. We start our meeting, as we always like to do, just by acknowledging that the lands that which we're gathered on are the traditional territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and just honoring that their connections to these lands and adjoining waters continues to this day. Up first, we have approval of the agenda. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. We have adoption of minutes. We can move September 9th and September 12th together. Is there any changes, corrections, or amendments that people have? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. First off, you may notice a gap to my right here. Your left is Councillor Appleton, unfortunately, is traveling for work today and is unable to join us remotely, so we are down to 6 for this evening. I just want to express my appreciation to all the members of council who were able to attend UBCM this year, which was 6 of us, and thank Councillor Green for holding down the fort in Oak Bay while the rest of us were attending. It was always, like always, a mix of interesting presentations and discussions and plenary session. I just want to acknowledge on Sunday was the Bowker Creek Biodiversi Day that was held here, actually at not in the community, but obviously Bowker Creek is near and dear to us. I just also want to point out for those who have been watching our stump on Oak Bay Avenue in front of IBD Books for the last couple of years, have been waited for the right moment to remove it, is now being removed and should be back and being repaired as quickly as possible. So it took a long time to get all of this. It's a very difficult thing to get out, unfortunately, with all of the underground utilities there, but that work is finally underway. I just want to let people know that we have started a consultation on blasting in the community, and that is up on the connect.oakbay.ca website, so certainly seeking public input on that. And then finally, just want to acknowledge that next Monday is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. There's a couple of events that I would encourage people to consider. One is the South Island Powwow. That's an event open for all people from across the whole region. It's being hosted by Songhees and but many other First Nations in the South Island and beyond across BC are going to be attending. That's at Royal Athletic Park, and the doors open at 10, but there's a grand entry event with singing and speeches and things happening right at noon. It's actually a really interesting event. If you haven't had a chance to go, there's all kinds of food and arts and cultural events going on there throughout the day, so highly recommend. We also have, just more locally, Reconciliation Oak Bay Network, which is a group of interested people throughout Oak Bay, are once again hosting a community gathering at 9:30, so just before the powwow starts, in front of the Snowyeth Welcome Pole at the Oak Bay High School. So the entire community is welcome to attend that as well. That concludes my comments for the morning, or for today. Up next, we have public comment and question period. This is a portion for those who haven't participated before. It's just a chance for any member of the public who wants to talk to Oak Bay Council about items that are of interest to the district to come forward and speak to us. Each person has up to 3 minutes. We have up to, I think it's half an hour for the entire session, but we don't have that many people here, so I assume we're not going to have that many. But people online, if you would raise your hand within the app, that would be the ideal way of thinking. We have nobody on a registered speaking list, but it is open for anybody. I will point out, if you're here to speak to items on the agenda, that's items that are allow for public input at this point, we would ask that you provide your comments at the time of the item that comes up on the agenda. So this is for items that aren't on the agenda tonight that are still of interest to Oak Bay. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak to council on any matters? Please come forward. The process is very simple. It's very welcoming. I know sometimes it's a bit awkward coming in. Just state your name and municipality of residence. You don't have to give your address, just your municipality. And then you have up to 3 minutes to address council. Oh, and you have to press the button on the microphone in front of you. Yep. You don't have to be too close to it, though. It does pick up pretty well.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Emma Coltmans, and I live on York Place within the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area with my husband.
Just for things on the York Place item tonight, we're not taking public input on that.
Okay.
So if it moves forward from here, it'll go to a public hearing, and that's the place that we're going to be taking public input. Tonight's the night where we decide which direction we're going to take it. So we don't take public input on that item.
On that item. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was speaking a bit more to general heritage restoration project
You
proposals.
can talk about things in general. You absolutely can do
Okay.
that. You just can't
Okay.
speak to a specific application.
Okay, okay. So just continuing, yeah, so I live on York Place, my husband and 2-year-old son. We purchased our home in 2018, shortly after its heritage designation and subdivision. And we deeply value the history and character of our neighborhood and fully support the HCA. As we have observed the application process for heritage restoration projects within the HCA, we have had some questions and concerns. While the HCA's role is to protect heritage and support the revitalization of historical properties, we have seen restoration proposals face significant delays and require multiple iterations. I understand the caution taken when considering restoration proposals because we all care deeply about achieving the best outcomes. I do, however, think that we need to balance this due diligence with a sense of timeliness, particularly when we are endeavoring to restore structures with significant decay and deterioration. It is my worry that the current approach to these proposals may lead to missed opportunities to preserve the heritage that we all cherish, and in doing so undermine rather than support the very intent of the HCA. I think that inherent to supporting the HCA is recognizing and really embracing these unique opportunities when they arise to restore significant historical structures, particularly when the proposals have been carefully considered and have been responsive to feedback. I also am imagining how resource-intensive heritage restoration projects must be, and I'm concerned that the current process, which appears to be quite complex and lengthy, might unintentionally actually discourage others from pursuing important restoration efforts in the future. And so I think it's crucial we create a supportive precedent for these heritage restoration proposals going forward, such that we're encouraging rather than discouraging the protection of this incredibly special region within Oak Bay, the HCA. So thank you very much for your time and allowing me to speak, and I appreciate all of the efforts of the council in working to preserve our heritage for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a lovely house you have, and certainly there's some applications are complicated and take more time than others. I think we have a good example tonight of a couple of some simpler, some more complicated. Anybody else wish to come forward and address council on matters of interest to Oak Bay that are not on the agenda tonight? Not seeing anybody. Looking online. Okay, I don't see anybody who's flagged, so I will, at this point, come back to this table and move on to item 6, or section 6 of the agenda. This section does allow for public input. So we have two items. We have 6.1, which is a council project sign-off for council priority project number 78. This is for optimizing our development process. Mr. Boel, our Director of Community Building and Planning, please go ahead to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor. This particular item is something that has been identified before as a priority by Council to review our development approval process back in 2022. Following the changes in the housing regulation last year by the province, a project was included into the Housing Action Program called Optimizing the Development Process. Current processes and systems are geared towards limited development activity as observed in recent years. However, with substantial changes now being made, allowing new housing options, the process needs to be updated in preparation for housing supply growth in the district. Some improvements have been underway already, as they were planned earlier and were included in the department's work plan. Specifically, a new web-based application portal called eApply, initially going to be available for plumbing permits, is being launched this month. And we are also preparing a web-based tool for online inspections of booking of inspections for building permits later this year. Those are relatively minor scope initiatives outside of this project. But the goal of this particular council priority project is larger, and it aims to streamline the entire application process and create efficiencies in the approval process, all with the aim of facilitating and expediting new housing options in the district. The scope includes a detailed review of the current processes related to new development, and this extends from the early stages of land use approvals through council through to the building permitting and completion and construction of projects. It involves several district departments that already collaborate on the review and on the approvals related to construction projects. And then based on the review, as that is part of the scope of this particular project, or process improvement options would be identified, and this would conclude part one of this project, which is in front of you tonight. Based on those recommendations, a subsequent part two for this project would be scoped at a later date and also have your input. But we need to know the implementation recommendations for that are part of this particular part of the project. In terms of funding, this part one scope of the Optimized Development Processes project is funded with a grant to the value of $105,000 received under the Local Government Development Approvals Program. We are available for any questions or comments you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boel. For those people of interest on any of these items in the public participation period, what we'll do is our standard practice of just getting a brief introduction from staff, gives council a chance to ask questions, and then following council questions before we get to any motions, we'll open the floor to any members of the public who wish to talk to council. They can ask questions or make comments, and then we'll come back to this table and give some direction. So with that, are there any questions of staff? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Smart, and then Councillor Green.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Boel. My first question is just with regards to the external stakeholders. Can we assume that recent applicant outreach will include residents who are unfamiliar with building processes, as well as trades and designers? I just wanted to get a sense of the sort of, there was a mention about developers being consulted, but I assume that the outreach would be really to all the different types of people that come to the planning counter. If you could clarify, thank you.
Mr. Boel? Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Good evening, Worship and members of Council. I guess the end engagement will be with those who use the service, so we would contact applicants of the various types of applications and seek their feedback and input at the relevant time in the process.
Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Another question I had was just with regards to the exclusion of changes in the budget for provincial housing directives and things changing down the line. And I wondered, do we have a contingency, knowing that it's quite possible that there might be some new information related to provincial housing directives that may come our way during this project?
Mr. Boel?
Through the Mayor, yes, we have an overall budget that includes both a reservation for a project that could be defined down the road, as well as contingency and a general project management allowance. And it was added last year to make sure that we had that flexibility to be able to respond to upcoming changes. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. Just one last question. It was just with regards, and I really appreciated the scope and objectives being written out. And I just noted that I had a few more things that I were hoping were measures of success on the project. And I just wanted to share them just to make sure I wasn't getting my expectations too high and just to see if it was sort of aligned with what staff was expecting. So those were just that the goals would be to reduce the overall cost of housing through processing projects faster, and that this would encourage potentially more development applications if we get a good reputation for efficient processes. And then, of course, the saving of staff time to open up capacity and the saving, again, of council time to open up capacity. And so I just wondered if those felt true to staff as well, or if I was making my Christmas wish list too high. Thanks.
Mr. Boel?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you, definitely faster approvals and more straightforward process. There are options to save time, we think, and part of that work is also in the works, right? Council has asked for example, for delegation of minor variances. Reducing the cost is less central, I think, but if we think about a more efficient process, I think there's going to be some at least definitely indirect cost savings. And if processes get shorter, it does allow us to reconsider the fees. Our fees are set up to cover the current processes, but if we make changes that result in shorter processes, we can also have a look at the application fees in particular. Thank you.
I'm just to Councillor Smart's question, is it possible to include those like the success criteria of seeing actual shortened application timelines and reduce staff time for applications? Is that something we can just include in that so that we actually do measure that at the end of this project? Mr. Boel?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, or thank you, Mayor. It depends if we're thinking about measuring the effects over time, that will be after the project. But I think at the end of the project or at the end of this phase, we will have more of a clear sense of what kind of changes could be made and what the anticipated time savings or cost savings would be. I think that's definitely something that would be defined. So it's in that realm. Yes, we can look at the process on its own, but how it works out down the road is a separate matter.
So just for clarification, the evaluation and success criteria are really for phase one, not for the overall project at this point. Okay, thank you. Councillor Green.
Thanks, Mayor. And through you to Mr. Boel. Thank you, Mr. Boel, for the reports and your comments so far. I just have some questions starting with page 11, 2.3 of the report under out of scope. And I see that community engagement is out of scope. I also am wondering about engagement with First Nations. That was raised in a letter in correspondence attached to the package. So I'm concerned that we need to have a plan for community engagement. As you know, there's a certain amount of concern about housing in Oak Bay on both sides of the ledger, and I think it's really important to capture the voices of our community in the process. So my question is, why is community engagement out of scope, and is it possible to reevaluate at any time, at any point in time? And then finally, the role of UDI, and that has been raised in a couple of pieces of correspondence. I share the concern. They are a real estate lobby. They are not a stakeholder, in my opinion, and that is supported by other comments in correspondence. So those are my questions, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Maybe just clarification of where consultation comes in or after phase one. Mr. Boel?
Yeah, thank you. Community engagement. Yeah, I think from a staff perspective, this is a topic that is hard to have general community engagement about because the processes are particularly relevant for those applicants that have experience or are about to have experience. Now, there is the category of building permits. I think that does affect a lot of miscellaneous residents, so to say, and not necessarily people that are in the development industry so much. So we left it out because this particular part is more taking stock and an assessment and coming up with recommendations. I think when it comes to part two, that's where we have an opportunity to revisit that and think about the actual changes we're going to make, and that would be a more probably a better phase of the project or a better part of the project to look at community engagement options.
Okay, thank you. And I think the references to UDI and other things were part of the OCP review, not this piece. Is that, I think, Councillor Green, I think so. Maybe just...
My apologies. I read both reports together and because they're related. So I apologize for the question not being totally relevant at the moment.
Nope.
Relevant to the next report. Thank you.
You're just ahead of the rest of us. That's all. It's a good thing. Anything else, Councillor Green? That's it. Okay, I have Councillor Patterson and then Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the report, Mr. Boel. Just a question on page 10. It does, kind of down near the end of the page, it talks about some of the challenges that exist in the district right now that maybe have a greater review and then advice on what to move forward with. But right in the last bullet point, it said there's limited in-house IT support to optimize current software functionality and or to support future software integration and development processes. So would the intent of this review then not only identify some of those deficiencies, but would the would the goal be to weigh how we can improve the effectiveness of what we have to make it fully functional, or more to assess what we don't have and weigh the merits of adding to supports that would be offset by savings within the process?
Mr. Boel?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, this particular part one of the project will only spend limited time on those kind of questions, and that also has to do with the funding source. And because one of the non-eligible purposes of that work is specifically zooming in on software or software acquisition or other supports around systems in an organization. So I think this review hopefully might identify opportunities or ideas about particularly how systems would need to change or how they could be improved, or maybe give a high-level recommendation about that certain functionalities may be available already but not implemented in the district. So it will be at that high-level nature of recommendation on that particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boel. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And so just in follow-up to that then, coming out of this report would the goal be to identify perhaps more efficiencies that will be created, and then after that is identified and based upon feedback from councillor or staff or whoever has input to go further into identifying the costs to create those efficiencies?
Mr. Boel?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, as part of part two, when we look at the details of implementation, we can look at that. It would need to be scoped for that particular part of the project, but definitely an interest on the part of the organization, I think, because we know that there are more and more and different solutions out there that we need to look at, but that would be part of that subsequent phase of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd like to direct quickly just a sort of preamble comment and then a question to Mr. Boel. Lots of consultants do business process reviews, and I'm curious about the extent to which, in looking for a consultant, you'll be able to, you're looking for somebody who will be able to collaborate well with staff, so that there are opportunities for real staff growth and learning as you go through this big review of what you currently do and what you need to do in future. And I just asked that question out of my own sort of background in doing a few of these in business environments. And I think that the best ones work when the staff who really have to deliver the services are closely involved. So I just wanted your comment on to what extent you expect staff to be really working closely in taking things apart and then putting them back together again.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Mr. Boel?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Definitely something that is high on our radar as well, because every municipality has its own ways of doing things, and things have evolved over time. And OBE similarly has specific processes that were created for certain reasons, and we need to check through close collaboration with the consultants that will help us with this. If those reasons for being are still there, but also learn from other examples and best practices elsewhere, and putting the consultants' insight and expertise together with staff ideas for improvements, and that make that inform the recommendations at the end of this particular phase. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just have two quick questions, and we'll go to any members of the public who wish to talk to us on this item. One is just in the preamble was spoken to about new development. Obviously, there's time issues with applications for renovations and so forth as well. So I'm assuming this covers all development application processes, not just new developments. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. It includes the building permit process as well.
Great, thank you. And I guess the question I have is just, obviously, you can do some, efficiency changes at a staff level, but at some point, there are, risks and rewards that come from that. And ultimately, as a governance level, we have to come we have to sort of, I think, adjudicate the relevant, risks for the benefits. So is that happening? That's probably not happening in phase one then. That would be probably a later phase as we're looking at the specific options, that some of those questions would come back to council? Or is that the conclusion of phase one would be, here's some options to look forward to going forward with, and here's some of the, the pros and cons and risks attached to, those different potential approaches? Mr. Boel?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, definitely we would anticipate, and we are requesting that as part of this work, we do evaluate the recommendations that are put forward, and basically expect that those recommendations come with a good rationale, and that may well include risk and reward or time savings or other pros or cons related to those improvements or recommendations. So that's our expectation to have that as part of the recommendation at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That satisfies my questions. At this point, I'll go to the members of the public for item 6.1. Is there anybody from either online or in person that wishes to address council on item 6.1? If you are online, I just ask that you use the raise hand feature within Zoom to let us know. But if you can't get that working, you can just turn your video on and wave at us, and we'll try and let you into the meeting. Anybody wish to come forward and talk to council on item 6.1? Not seeing anybody, we'll come back to this table.
Receipt.
Moved and seconded. This is just receipt of the information for tonight. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
Move the staff recommendation.
Okay, this is approving the scope. Any further discussion on that? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, I just want to emphasize again, just having been on the other side of these applications many times, that I really think the success of this project will come from making sure that we engage with the sort of four major type of applicants, that being the owner, the developer builder, the architect designer, and the inexperienced homeowner. And I just want to make sure that the engagement does touch all of those aspects, and so that's just more of a comment than a question, but just looking to that for the success of the project. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's good feedback, I think, and appropriate. Anything else? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? That carries. Moving on to item number 6.2. This is a similar council project sign-off for CPP 75, the completed mandated 5-year review of OCP, and 76, the completed mandated pre-zoning to implement updated OCP. Mr. Boel, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a short introduction, and we also have a short presentation by Ms. Ramel, if Council has the time for that. So it's a pleasure to present the project sign-off for the official community plan and zoning bylaw updates as the next project as part of the Housing Action Program. This is the first required 5-year review of the OCP that is responding to new legislated requirements from the province, and it will mark a shift to regular 5-year updates to the OCP rather than the softly suggested 10 years that's currently what used to be in place, sorry. For this OCP update, the emphasis will be on accommodating the 5 and the 20-year housing needs and updating the land use and growth management framework for this. The timelines for completion are set by the province for the end of next year. The zoning bylaw as well. By the end of 2025, both the official community plan and the zoning bylaw need to be updated and designate and zone sufficient land to address the 20-year housing needs. For this reason, this is a combined project scope that outlines the work for both the OCP update and an update to the zoning bylaw. And staff are presenting a scope and a proposed approach with the aim of meeting the legislated timeline and incorporating the legislated updates, which are primarily housing related, but also include other updates that are closely linked to those required updates. However, the required focus on housing cannot be addressed just on its own merits, and substantial changes like the ones that we anticipate needing to be made for housing also have bearing on other policy matters, in particular the overall land use management framework in the OCP for other land uses, and also the transportation network. And there are also a number of other policy areas that are out of date. Our OCP is 10 years old, or where in the district in the past 10 years created new plans and strategies separate from the OCP but were slated to be included at some point in time. So the project seeks to incorporate these related areas and new policies where possible in the limited time available. And some matters may need to be reviewed further in another 5 years at the time of a next required OCP update, or perhaps through a separate freestanding OCP amendment later on. And this is mainly because the available time is very limited compared to our would be a traditional approach to updating an OCP. Usually municipalities take several years for that, and very substantial and extensive engagement. But staff have made efforts to incorporate these additional scope and engagement activities in this limited time available to, on the one hand, balance the legislated requirements, and on the other hand, take the opportunity to update our bylaws so they are modernized and cohesive and effective in supporting the implementation of the district's visions and goals. So the current package, so to say, outlines what we think we can do in a limited amount of time, and it will be quite a feat to pull off with hopefully a very experienced and well-rounded consultant support team. But also because of this, any substantive changes that council may want to ask for, if that's the case, we may need to look back at the scope and see if there's any trade-offs to make sure that we have a package that can be delivered within the provincial timelines. So Ms. Rommel has prepared a short presentation that zooms in a bit on the different work areas for the OCP and the zoning bylaw. And if it's helpful for the discussion, Mayor, I'd like to ask Ms. Rommel to provide that presentation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Welcome, Ms. Rommel.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, as Mr. Boel introduced the item, it's the Council project sign-off for the OCP update and zoning bylaw update. You have to be patient with this. So the outline, we'll walk through quickly. So the combined project for 2 bylaw updates, the work areas, the project overview that will focus on phasing, the communications and engagement, and we'll highlight the council decision points. So again, this is for Council Priority Project 75, which is the OCP update, and Council Priority Project number 76, which is the zoning bylaw. So the approach to the review considers required updates and supportive updates through 6 work areas. The required are to respond to the legislative requirements, and the supportive are intended to have some cohesive bylaws and move the policy framework forward. So work area 1 is to accommodate the 5 and 20-year housing need. So that requires update to the OCP and the zoning bylaw to respond to the interim housing needs report. Staff are working on that to present to council in October, which council will consider and hopefully receive. So the update to the OCP will include a wider range of housing policies as required, and revise the land use designations and map to respond to the 20-year housing need unit, and then update the zoning bylaw to pre-zone for the number of units identified within the housing needs report. So work area 2 focuses around an update for the land use and growth management framework. This is to increase residential density, not only being directed to existing villages, commercial areas, and multifamily residential areas, but also infill opportunities within neighborhoods, ensuring that the provision of community amenities to keep services close to residents. With growth and change comes contemporary needs for transportation options and access to services and amenities. We'll also look at implementing some new tools through density bonusing and inclusionary zoning. Work Area 3 looks at integrating plans for a robust community policy framework. Since the adoption of the OCP in 2014, there are a number of initiatives, strategies, and plans that have been completed and that are currently underway. Incorporating these elements from the following plans will strengthen the linkages to the Oak Bay's community policy framework. So some of these plans have already been adopted and supported by council. Others are ongoing, such as the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan, which is getting underway, and others are technical assessments that again are either underway or will shortly be wrapped up. Work Area 4 focuses on applying a climate lens and updating the greenhouse gas baseline and targets. In 2019, the district declared a climate emergency and has been gradually increasing climate change efforts since. The OCP offers an update to apply a climate lens and review and reinforce the existing direction in the OCP to develop complete communities. And another exciting element of this is climate action planning is set to be started and underway in 2025 with our new staff position. Work Area 5 looks to integrate new demographic data and statistics, looking to refresh the document, update it based on 2021 census data where available, and update the context and reference sections just to be more current and up to date. Lastly, Work Area 6 looks to update the implementation framework. It will be important to monitor progress towards the OCP vision and ensure the OCP is an effective tool for guiding land use and planning decisions to meet the needs of the community. Now with expectations around reporting intervals, housing targets, housing needs report, and OCP and zoning bylaw updates, it's an opportune time to lay the foundation to create a more consistent process to contribute to the organization's need to measure progress on an annual basis to identify emerging issues and update and adapt the framework. To support the work plan items, we have some proposed communications and engagement. The approach, kind of high level, looks to engage the community at a community scale. There will both be online and in-person opportunities for engagement to engage a broad cross-section of the community. It will focus on the OCP framework, so that'll be the land use guiding principles and more high level. Again, not proposed as part of the update is changing the vision or the goals, so it's just trying to align with that and bring it forward to meet the legislative requirements. Light touch with the zoning bylaw. So the way the project is presented is to have the zoning bylaw as the regulatory framework to implement the OCP. So it's positioned further back than the forward-facing kind of OCP aspect. We'll be delineating what is legislated and what the community can influence, and I'm focusing on that, and emphasizing the new 5-year review cycles moving forward, just to inform the community that that will be the expectation moving forward. And this provides the high-level overview of the two projects that would move together concurrently. This obviously starts at 2025, but if council does give the green light tonight to move forward, we would be moving out to a request for proposals. So that is not pictured on here, but that would initiate the project starting Q4 of 2024. So this just highlights the council decision points. So this evening, September 23rd, we have the initial staff report presenting the project sign-off. Late November, early December, council directs us to move forward. We would take the project out for a request for a proposal. We bring back to council and a revised project sign-off if necessary, and have council direct the award. Late March 2025, we would present the OCP framework report with the zoning bylaw and high-level recommendations report. August 2025, after engagement, we would bring back the summary and recommendations to inform the draft OCP and draft zoning bylaw. November 2025, another round of engagement and recommendations report with the proposed OCP, proposed zoning bylaw, and December 2025, public hearing as directed by council with hopefully the bylaw adoption by December 2025. And the last slide here that we have is just the recommendations which are included in the report. So I will leave it there and pass it back, and we're here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ms. Morell. Are there questions for staff? Go ahead, Councillor Green, Patterson, and Smart.
Thank you. Ms. Rimmel, and I just wanted to have you, if you wouldn't mind, defining two terms just for the benefit of the public. One is a light touch on what does that mean? And secondly, engagement at community scale, Thank you.
Ms. Rimmel.
Thank you. So I think light touch, the way that we intend it is that the OCP, kind of the high level concepts and the policy directions and the land use framework would be where we would be mostly having that more in-depth engagement at the community workshops. And then, so the zoning bylaw would be positioned behind that and kind of be informed by that process as the regulatory framework. So I think that there would be more informing, but just more focus on the actual OCP as opposed to the zoning bylaw. And then the second question, community scale.
Engagement at community scale.
Thank you. Yeah, so the way that the project is structured right now is with some in-person open houses, online open houses, and then some community workshops as well. I think the way that we're thinking the community workshops we would be more topic-based rather than geographically based with some of those concepts. So that's kind of more community scale as opposed to really drilling down into like a more of a village or neighborhood planning scale exercise.
Councillor Green, please continue.
And thank you very much for answering the questions. My third question, and I was on the wrong report, although I see them as related, but was the engagement of First Nations and what that might look like through the mayor to you. Thank you.
Do I give that to Ms. Ramel? Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. As outlined in the project sign-off, at this point, the initial contact with First Nations would be from the outset, so we would send a letter to the nations asking them if they would like to be engaged, and if so, what that might look like. So definitely extending that conversation and just, again, trying to take the lead from them as to how and when they would like to be engaged.
Thank you. I'll just make a quick comment. I was involved in the last revision of the official community plan in Oak Bay back in 2012, 2013, 2014. It really captured the imagination of a lot of the community, so I think the community engagement piece here is critical. And at the end of the day, the official community plan reflects the community and reflects their ownership of the plan too. So I really encourage robust community engagement in this particular exercise. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. I have Councillor Patterson, Smart Braithwaite.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to staff. Just a quick follow-up on some of the discussion that Councillor Green just raised. On the communications and engagement plan, it does state that it'll be developed in collaboration with consultants and staff, and I just would like to identify if and when council will have an opportunity to review and comment, and I'm hoping that's prior to it going to public engagement.
I'm not sure who to give that to, but Mr. Boel, welcome back.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, if that would be council's wish, that would be good to know and get your direction on. I think right now we're assuming that with this approved scope, we'll work with that. I do think, as we do in other projects, we might run the materials for consultation by council earlier on. Ms. Royal, can you clarify if that's the case in this case or not?
Yeah, thank you. I think with that initial council check-in, it would be with that OCP framework report and the zoning bylaw recommendations report, and then the project has us moving quickly into engagement. So I think that report would, again, kind of be a high level, these are our intentions. I think if we stick with the timing as in the report, you know, we would have those engagement activities mostly structured, but council could definitely have influence on that point within that timeline.
For my clarification on that one, because there is a project sort of sign off once the consultants is there, right? So is that would include a high level consultation plan as part of that project sign off? Is that correct? No. Mr. Boel?
Well, the project sign off today would be for the current scope,
Yes.
and following that, we would build an RFP on that, retain a consultant, and the project would get underway. So right now, there's no designated earlier check-in point with council necessarily on the engagement. But if that's desired, I think that would be good to know because that means that we need to plan for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe something we want to consider giving some direction on, because I think it's often helpful for us just to have a touch point so that we're all sort of understanding what that plan is, and if there's anything we want to add, we can. Understanding it may affect timelines and budget, obviously. Councillor Patterson, please continue.
Yes, thank you, and thanks for that clarification, because I didn't understand where that came in, and I do think that we have in trying to expedite as much work as possible, we've sometimes gone to public engagement without council having a prior look at things. And I think that there is a benefit to having council review it in advance without, dragging out the time period too much, and just comment on it, on what we see. So, I appreciate receiving that directive. My second question really is about identifying when and how will the assessed infrastructure, amenities, and service needs to support future growth, referenced on page 5, be used to inform and integrate with the district's sustainable infrastructure plan. In other words, the financial piece of this.
Boel?
Yeah, thank you for the mayor. We have a project underway for amenity cost charges and development cost charges. So to some extent that will start to look at those needs. And we anticipate, I think it might be one of the projects that also will inform this project. And there needs to be a bit of a what's it called? Ground truthing as well, once we work on the OCP itself and come up with the outline there. We need to make sure that, because we do anticipate by that time the AC and DC program will be in place. But that's part of the puzzle. It's beyond that is, of course, is the 5-year financial plan. I think that is probably something that would see follow up next year in the budget cycle for 2026, because by that time there would be more known and more is confirmed as part of the OCP project about what changes might be proposed for the long run. So I think that's a couple of ways how I see that affect the financial planning in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just a follow-up to that, the existing OCP does have a financial aspect to it and goals and objectives. And so without that being identified within the scope of this, again, is the intent to not reference any financial goals or oversight in the OCP on this this version of an OCP?
So the question is really, are we looking at changing any of those statements that are in there? I think, I don't think that we are looking at changing that if I read the report correctly, but staff, perhaps just clarify or confirm.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you. Financial implications or changes to financial policies, to the extent that they're in there, are not specifically on our radar as something to look at. That said, as I think how the land use framework is changed will have other impacts, but those I anticipate would be evaluated separately. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Boel. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I have next Councillor Smart and then Braithwaite.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff. My first question is just with regards to how this process is going to interweave with our village planning process. And at one point, I believe we had talked about overlapping them so that the early visioning for our urban village centers could potentially happen during the OCP process and then be further refined later. I wondered if staff had considered hiring the same consultant for the village planning as for the OCP, so that work can really intertwine, and if staff can just comment on how that will work. Thank you.
Mr. Boel?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. For the village area planning process itself, which is going to be looking at more detailed planning for particular areas, that's quite far in the future still, or far. I think the current planning is 2026 after this project wraps up. So it would be hard to commit based on procurement policies and to necessarily have the same consultant. And to the other question about the village area planning and overlap, I do think this Officium community plan update will start to look at village areas, because as part of looking for housing options and housing needs, there's going to be the need to look at other land uses than infill housing, which we just dealt with earlier this year, and the question where those will be located kind of in our view, is very closely related to the future of our village areas. So in that sense, this project will provide an important foundation for that follow-up work. And in a way, we are going to be talking about complete communities and what kind of land use framework and growth framework do we see for the district. And that has direct bearing on the village areas, the bigger ones and the smaller ones. So that will definitely be discussed next year. Thank you.
Please continue, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, just to follow up on that, knowing how challenging it can be for some people to visualize what density looks like, if we are going to be, in a sense, really in our OCP, basically saying how dense our urban village centers are going to be, can we expect then that our engagement process will be very visual and charrette focused so that all the members of our community can truly understand what it means when we say, do you want Oak Bay Village to be 4 stories or 6 stories? And they don't really know what that looks like in a streetscape. Like, can we expect that our workshop and engagement process will then involve very visual drawing type of approach so that we can really bring our residents along in understanding what density is going to look like in our community?
Boel?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. We haven't given that particular approach a lot of thought, but we do have a placeholder for this, I think, in our scope, because we do have, and as part of the work area 2, we speak to reviewing and revising urban design policies for village, multi-unit residential, mixed use and commercial areas. And I think it is indeed very important to have also a visual language about those things rather than words or colors on maps. So what it exactly will look like, we don't know yet. That probably will vary a little bit between the different consultants that will propose to do work on this, but it's definitely something that is also on our mind to have effective ways to communicate those options to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boel. Anything else, Councillor Smart?
Yeah, I do have, I'll try to be brief, a few more questions through you, Mayor, to staff again. I wondered, will there be any focus groups for particularly equity groups that are less likely to show up at engagement sessions? I'm thinking particularly how hard it is to get the youth voice, as well as there's other groups such as single parents, and I'm sure other different groups that consultants will be aware of that are harder to reach. So I just wondered, are we doing any equity reach in this OCP engagement? Thank you.
Do we have that level of detail at this point, Ms. Ramel?
Through the mayor, in the engagement and communication section of the project sign-off, we do identify that we would like to reach those more seldom heard groups. So I think we would make a concerted effort and outline that in the engagement and communications plan that we are looking to target that group and have broad and robust community engagement. At this point, we haven't contemplated specific events for some of these groups, but really trying to communicate and outreach and get them to come to the events that are structured within here at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, with regards to, yes, this project will have a climate lens, which was so fantastic to see, but then with the exclusion of flood construction levels and sea level rise, I just couldn't pair those two things together. How can we look at this with a climate lens and not consider flooding and sea level rise? Could you help me wrap my head around that? Thank you.
Mr. Boel?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. The main reason for that is that to truly have effective policies and new regulations probably around sea level rise and flood construction level, we think that's a detailed, more technical study that needs to take place. But it's a bit of a very different animal than the official community plan level work on the overall general land use planning for the district. And for that reason, we've left it out, because to add something technical and kind of potentially impactful new policy in this scope seemed a little bit out of whack with the nature of the other work that needs to be done. And the other reason is really that because of the limited available time, we really need to get this higher level OCP work done first. And then we will have to turn to the details of sea level rise and what it means for construction, hopefully soon thereafter, because it's definitely an outstanding matter that requires our attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through Mayor, just to follow up to that, then does that mean that we would be excluding other things such as liquefaction zones and soil quality when we're looking at where to densify our community? Like, would that kind of technical detail this time around, because of the refresh, be the sort of thing that wouldn't make it into the engagement?
Boel?
Through you, Mayor, we do have a general sense of where sensitive areas are. There is some mapping done from a couple of years ago by the CRD. So I think that information will inform our work for the OCP. So, but unfortunately, we won't be able to dig deeper at this point and have more detailed information. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Just one more question through you, Mayor, to staff. Just with regards to this balance of, obviously, one of our main objectives right now is looking at housing in our community. Does staff have an approach or a strategy for how we do that and achieve that goal, but still make sure that we're considering the balance of natural areas? We had quite a few letter writers write in about natural assets studies and really looking at things like rain gardens and tree canopy and all those sort of aspects. How do we keep that as a lens on the project when our time is so limited? I wondered if staff could speak to that. Thank you.
Mr. Boel?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I think that's one of the reasons why our housing policies need to be integrated, and that's how these work areas have been set up in the other topic areas that are relevant to the district. And I think even though we don't have a whole lot of time to spend on updating our environmental policies, we do have quite robust environmental policies already in the OCP to rely on. And within the limited time available, we do seek to integrate new housing policies in that existing framework. So there is going to be some cross-reference and consideration of that. That's part of how we would approach this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. I have Councillor Braithwaite, then Watson.
Thanks, Mayor. Actually, all of my questions have been asked. But
Watson? Sorry. Please continue.
But I just want to go back to something that that Councillor Green was talking about before around UDI. Just to clarify, because there was a letter that we received, and they talked about the input of UDI as a stakeholder, and that Saanich and View Royal have cancelled their memberships with UDI, but we don't even have a membership, if I understand, with UDI. Is that correct?
Mr. Boel?
Through you, Mayor, for a while we had at the staff level a membership to be connected to their events, training opportunities, and general intelligence. However, as of, I think, early this year or last year, we're no longer, we don't have a corporate membership at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Boel. Just a question to do this in the time presented. I see that the plan really doesn't have any wiggle room, and I just wondered if you could comment on what the province is indicating about late adoption of plans. I know they said things with respect to Bill 44 and the housing zoning. What have they signaled to municipalities about delayed plan implementation?
Heard anything, Ms. Ramil?
I have not seen any. They're yet to release their policy guidance on the OCP and zoning bylaw updates, so they are a little bit behind schedule. I know that they were targeting mid-September, so anticipate that shortly. In conversations with provincial staff, they did say that that won't be as kind of technical as it was for the small-scale multi-unit housing, more just kind of a how-to guide on how to implement the legislation, so quite high level. What I can say is this was put through a different piece of like legislation and aspect, and it doesn't have that same notification requirement that the small-scale multi-unit housing did. So I think that they definitely want to see municipalities are making an earnest effort to get that over time, and I think that they are still having conversations with municipalities as we start to shift to OCP updates, because we've all been quite involved with the small-scale multi-unit housing updates. So conversations, it seems that, you know, they're still discussing that, and they might come up with some sort of solution for that, but it is on their radar.
Thank you. A question about the integration of other plans. And I know we've been specifically asked in correspondence about the Bowker Creek blueprint at this phase, at this stage in our OCP refresh. And I just, there are so many municipal planning documents and policies that need to be part of this at this first step integration. At what point would other guidance or visions like that be able to be incorporated in our environmental review or the kind of the next round of a look at the document?
Ms. Ramel?
Thank you, through the mayor. Staff have received a draft copy. I think it's 90% complete of that. So we are reviewing it and we will get our comments back to the CRD. So there's a kind of working copy that we could look to incorporate depending on timing. Again, at what level is to be determined on those kind of aspects. As far as scoping, the next OCP review, it's clear that this one we have our 6 work areas. It's quite narrow. Kind of land use framework, growth management, and the housing is the main aspects of it. I think that we're going to hear what's important to the community and maybe what's missing through this process, and we will be able to identify that and look at that either through monitoring or implementation or potentially through council priority projects. So just acknowledging that this is the first one in a consistent kind of 5-year planning review program moving forward. So I think that there is definitely opportunity to have a different focus in the next OCP update. And whether that's, more in-depth environment and climate, I think that will offer a good opportunity then. And I think it dovetails nicely with, our climate action planner coming on board and doing some more of those documents. And again, just having more of a living official community plan moving here forward.
Thank you, that's really helpful. And then just a sort of related question about development permit areas from an environmental protection or climate protection point of view. That would also be work that starts to fall to the plate of the climate change planner and then gets integrated at a later stage. Is that correct? Like sort of the next review?
Boel.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. Possibly. I think for the climate planner, the first course of action is to work on both in-stream corporate initiatives, and the other big part is the climate action plan. And I think that first needs to be defined, and it may include direction to look into updating development permit areas, but possibly introducing new ones. So it will be a bit of a stepped approach. So right now, that's not immediately on the work plan. But I think it may be after the climate action planning process is further along. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I just have a couple brief questions. So if anybody's interested in speaking to council on this, you can raise your hand online and be ready to come forward here. One question is have we contemplated the role of the Advisory Planning Commission in this process? Are we looking at taking sort of drafts to them for comment, or are we... I'm just curious about where the engagement with that group is going to be included. Mr. Green?
Yeah. I think that's that we would be engaging the Advisory Planning Commission at the key stages in this process to use them as a sounding board and to receive their inputs in relation to their role in land use planning matters in relation to advising council on land use planning matters. So I think that is mentioned in the engagement section of the project sign-off to I think it just mentions advisory commission, so it's likely that at key stage we will probably also go to the Heritage Commission as well as to the advisory design panel if there is key things that we wish to seek input from those respective groups.
Perfect. Yeah, I saw them as an internal stakeholder kind of listed, but I wasn't sure if there was a specific role identified yet, but it sounds like that's still to be determined a little bit in details. And the only other question I really have is we've had a number of or at least a couple of questions around the use or non-use of development permit areas for all land use, not just the multifamily for the new zoning that we're contemplating. I just wonder, maybe my recollection of this is we had a long discussion in the course of the SSMU regulations that at the end of the day we opted to sort of set the boundaries of what we thought were reasonable builds of the buildings and leave the siting and design piece of it, rely on the other environmental factors. That's my understanding. That was essentially a conscious decision made in the last round when we were doing the single family changes. And so the DPAs in this case would really just apply to any of the newer, or I guess existing or newer multi-family zoning that we'd be contemplating. Is that, just want to make sure we're clear that we would, that's the proposal here, is essentially maintain the direction given by council, which is no DPAs for the small-scale multi-unit, but looking at DPAs as a potential tool for the larger multifamily.
Yeah, that's definitely the case from staff, is that we would be asking a consultant to develop or revise our existing development permit areas in relation to multifamily, commercial, mixed-use projects,
Okay.
as well as for those infill applications that go through a rezoning process as well.
Okay, thank you. And maybe I'll
And
invite...
also, I should mention that whilst we're not proposing to expand the environmental DPA, you know, there's definitely an opportunity to review those policies within that DPA to see if there is any tweaks that should be made to some of those guidelines within that existing development permit area, to see if it is following the latest best practice in relation to protection of riparian areas and the natural environment.
Great, thank you very much for that. And invite anybody to come forward, and if anybody is coming forward, I'll just make comment on that DPA piece. I think we did a little bit of a different approach than there was some mention of some other jurisdictions using DPAs, and that intention there was we went through a bit of significantly more public consultation and tweaking of our small-scale multifamily approach than we did just sort of implementing the provincial guidelines, and so that we're going to be testing that and see how it works out, and whether that those rules that we put in place work effectively or not. So, does anybody wish to come forward and speak to this item on the agenda? We've had a couple of pieces of correspondence. Seeing none, I
Receipt.
will come back to this table. Moved, is there a seconder for receipt? Moved and seconded, thank you. We don't usually debate receipt, it's just a fact of the matter. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move the staff recommendation. Do you want me to read it, or?
No, I think we'll just take it as written here. So it's those two, 75 and 76. Is there anything you wish to add, Councillor Braithwaite?
Yeah, I did, one of the questions that was asked by Councillor Smart, I had been thinking of asking, and that was in regards to the flooding, and whether that, any items that are out of scope that can be added into scope. And so I'm just wondering what the best way to do that would be.
So you're specifically for actually doing a review of the flood level areas as part of the OCP review? Mr. Boel, do we have a sense of what that review would look like? I mean, obviously we have sea level rise and reports and so forth coming from the CRD. Is there, for us to incorporate, I think you're talking about more of a policy perspective changes. Do we have any sense of that? We may need to have staff come back with some pieces on that if there's things, but Mr. Boel, perhaps you can answer now what the impact of including some of the flooding policy pieces.
Thank you, Mayor. There is some reference to, in the OCP, in the development permit area, particularly the one for geotechnical hazards. It does outline very high level, but that sea level rise is one of the things that need to be considered. But that's a very small area, unfortunately, in this district. The other tool we have is through building permits on the shoreline, particularly. Not so much in flooding areas, but on the shoreline we definitely have, under the provincial legislation, an opportunity to ascertain if the site is safe or if the proposal is safe to build. So at a high level, it would need to be specified clearly. We could identify policies that maybe state that we're going to review flood construction level in more detail at a later date. At that level, it could be done. But if the expectation or the hope is to investigate it in more detail and actually set a flood construction level for the district, or come up with policies and possibly limitations in areas that are maybe subject to flooding in the future, that is much more involved and technical. And if that were a high priority for council, we would probably need to take this scope back and see, well, what can we then leave out, and how do we navigate that in terms of timelines particularly. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just do a follow-up question on that, Councillor? Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I think what I'm hearing from you, though, is that there's going to be some technical review of many of these aspects. So there's not doing a fulsome review, but all of the sections of the OCP are going to have a go-over once to make sure that they're aligned with current best practices and so forth. If they're not, is there idea then to just flag them for future work, or to possibly bring them back for possible inclusion in the scope if they might be able to be managed? I'm just curious about what the internal thoughts are from a process. Mr. Boel?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm wondering if I can give different words to this question. Perhaps if Council's interested that as part of the review, we look at best practices, for example, and look at the type of policies that are OCP, like general high-level policies that are these days included in other OCPs. I can see that as part of the review. That probably would be this light touch term that we used, but it would fall short of a oak-based specific engineer review of where these conditions exist. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Just for clarification, do you need direction to kind of just do that flagging work and just sort of identify future work, or is that something that could be included in the current scope as defined?
Thank you, Mayor. I would appreciate kind of maybe in words what Council would like to see there, so we can make sure it's followed up on. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll leave it to Council if there's some wording that you want to add. Sure, I have Councillor Smart, then I have Councillor Green, and then Patterson.
Well, thank you. Somewhat in support of the motion, but I was going to put forward option 2 so that we could add some amendments. I do have 3 myself that I would like to bring forward based on discussion that's happened around the table. So with that in mind, with option 2 being that we do approve the scope of the project but add amendments, I wonder if that's something we might want to consider.
The motion is fine as it is, and we can just take amendments. There's no restrictions on amendments just because it's worded that way. So go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I'm really happy with this scope and report, and very excited that we have this work underway. There were 3 things that came up to me that I would hope that we could include. The first one being, and we haven't touched on this one yet, but is including a 25-year outer vision for what we think the community is going to be. A lot of the municipalities have included this in their OCPs, and I think it's a really useful exercise to ask the community where they see themselves 20, 30 years down the line, and it really sort of sets the tone for imagining what the density is going to be. So that was one aspect. The second one I wanted to add was with regards to having reconciliation planning.
Just going to take a second here.
Yeah.
In terms of that point of just framing the conversation in terms of where do we want to be in 20 or 25 years, just to kind of make sure this is a forward-looking piece. Is that? This is something
that's published on the visioning page. So City of Victoria, for instance, has a 2041 vision of what they think Victoria is going to be like in the future, and it's a vision statement as a result of their OCP document.
Just wondering if we can include the development of that as part of our, as a potential part of the scope. Mr. Boel, I'm just going to turn to you. I don't know what the impacts of doing something like that is. Certainly the questions that we're asking are all forward-looking, but not maybe to a specific date at this point. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you. We did leave defining a vision statement specifically out of scope, because we think that's it's relatively time-consuming to work on that, and because you would probably want to do that first and then talk about options for development. And the way we see this work out in this project, because of the limited timeline, would be to take the existing vision statement in the OCP. There's 3-4 paragraphs in our OCP that at first glance sound really to the point still, remain current after the 10 years. So what we envision to do is to skip the step of talking about that vision statement itself, but look at the options that are going to be drafted by us through the process, and probably connected to that existing vision statement, but look at it more practically, I guess, in terms of potential translations of that for the future. And I would anticipate there's still some options there to consider, but the time saving would be in looking directly or immediately at what it might translate to, but base it on the current vision statement in the OCP, because we don't think we have quite enough time to do it justice to get into that level of different type of engagement on the overall vision for the district. Thank you.
You have that answer then. Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I have that answer. We have a very divided community over the provincial housing directives and the density. And I really think that having a discussion around the vision of what Oak Bay's future is what's going to bring our community together in this OCP. So I feel very strongly about this being added to the scope. Would you like me to more carefully word an amendment that we could potentially vote on around the council table?
I think we're going to need that if, given the wording that's come from staff. I think if you want to have that as a part of the project, it would have to be a motion made. If you want to raise the other, you said you had 4 points you wish to raise?
I have 2 other points. Would you like to hear
Why don't we
those as
just,
well?
sure, if you
Yeah,
want
yeah.
to. we can
The
come
one
back
was
to
just
it.
with regards to bringing the conversation of reconciliation into the visioning process. If we're going to talk about where we want our community to be, in 20 years, we're doing a 20 years housing needs report. How can we not talk about what our plan is for reconciliation in those conversations? So I would like to potentially add that to the scope. The third one was just with regards to the discussion around the table of bringing the communications and engagement plan back to council. And that's all.
Geez, I was writing notes. What was
Yeah, sorry.
repeat
The
last
third one was just with regards to the comments from many councillors around the table with regards to potentially bringing the communications and engagement plan back to council prior to going ahead with it.
Thank you. I'm going to probably suggest asking a motion that directs that the communication and engagement plan come back to council for review prior to I guess that's all we have to say, is just for review be included. Is that sufficient, Mr. Boel, that we just give that direction so that we have a chance to have a look at the community engagement plan prior to it kicking off?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And to confirm what council's intent is with that, is that's about the approach to engagement, who is consulted, what kind of tools are used for that. But it probably doesn't include all the materials necessarily, because they would be produced subsequently, right? Thank you.
That's correct. Yes, I think that's exactly right. Just the sort of intended approach and reach out methods. So is that so moved by Councillor Smart?
Yeah, so just to clarify of those 3 things, I'll just start with a motion to amend the scope that staff bring back the communications and engagement plan to council prior to proceeding.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion on that item? Seeing none. Councillor Green, go ahead.
Just a question through you to Councillor Smart. Scope, engagement scope, is that what you were saying? Would that include, you had raised a concern about equity issues, and I think work project number 5 or work area 5 includes current and updating all the demographic information, so that would give us a better idea of the outreach that we have to do and to what groups and individuals. So that was just my point, I think, I wanted to make sure that was part of what you were thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the plan would come back with some of the details of how we're going about it, and I think part of this council's job would be to look at it through that lens and make sure that we're achieving those goals. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
I'll bring forward a motion with regards to adding a future-looking vision into the OCP process. Is that clear enough, or should I be more specific? I don't want to be more specific in a sense, but.
I think you probably need to be a little bit more specific, but I just want to give staff a quick chance to make sure there's some consultation going on here. I want to make sure there's any. Ms. Ramel?
Sorry, through the mayor, if I may ask a point of clarification. I'm just wondering, do you want a revised vision statement for the OCP, or are you, okay, well, and then I don't have to say the or then.
Okay, so the direction here is just to revise the vision statement within the OCP. Is that as part of the scope? Correct. Okay. That's
Just wanted to motivate on that. Our current.
I'm just trying to make sure I get a seconder. Is there a seconder for including revision of the vision statement within the OCP as part of this process? If not, then that ends that discussion on this piece.
Before discussion, I'll second it, but I have a comment.
Yeah, that's fine. Comments are always welcome, but it's moved. So go ahead and just motivate Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I appreciate how tight our time is with this project, and this isn't to disrespect staff and how carefully they have orchestrated trying to meet this impossible deadline. I really strongly believe that we need a unifying piece and a focus for our community to together come up with a positive vision for where they see us in 25 years. And I think that if we don't do this exercise, our current OCP vision from before is essentially just to cherish what we have. It isn't actually a vision for the future. And I believe that that is really what is going to unify us as a community and get us really excited and move momentum on this whole process.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Green and then Councillor Watson.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, and I appreciate what Councillor Smart is trying to achieve, but we are tied to a 5-year process. Every 5 years, these plans are updated, revised, etc. I think it's for me, it would be very difficult to produce a vision statement tonight, or even think about it until we've done some of the work that has been described to us. I don't believe I could speak on behalf of this community in terms of where they would like to be in 30 years. I know where I'll be, possibly not in Oak Bay, or maybe in some other form. But honestly, I think it's asking a lot at this juncture, I guess, and I think I don't know that yet. So
I just want to be absolutely clear. The motion is essentially to, as part of this process, develop a new vision statement as part of the OCP. That's
okay,
right, not tonight, but just as part of the process.
I know how tightly timed everything is for staff capacity and so on. So I'm not sure this is an absolutely critical phase of the work at this point, but I could be wrong.
Councillor Watson?
Thank you. I will not support the motion. I think that the focus, as staff have pointed out, of this exercise is really for us to update a plan so that it incorporates the housing needs that are identified over a 20-year period. And there's a mismatch between a vision statement for 25 years when really the focus of this work is specifically designed to address how we absorb that needed housing into our community. So it's very much a land use planning housing exercise at this point. There are many other policies, and in the next round, on the next 5-year review, or if we can do it sooner, there's nothing that says it has to wait till 5 years. I think that is a better time to start having that broader discussion with the community. But I just don't see how you can have a fair engagement around something that is that significant in the time frame that we have, and I don't think we can do it justice. So I prefer to delay that and just let staff and the consultant working with the community focus on the actual purpose, the legislative purpose of this OCP review.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I have Councillor Braithwaite and Patterson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm hoping to be around in 25 years, perhaps not around this table. However, I hope to be around. But I would have to agree with my two colleagues on their statements, and so I will not be able to support the motion.
Councillor Patterson, raise your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I will not support the this proposed amendment basically for the same rationale, but I certainly respect that typically visioning would lead an OCP process if it was the municipality typically taking charge of it. But we are doing this in response to provincial orders, and so being cognizant of that and the limited time frame, hopefully some of what we determine on the housing or the village plans or all of those for that will help perhaps implement density will lead some of that visioning. But I think that conversation, as Councillor Watson said, will flow out of this and not be part of it.
Thank you. Speaking very briefly, I love the idea of doing that big vision of the community. I also am recognizing that the title of this is the limited OCP review process, and I think that is an absolutely necessary process to do a full OCP review. I really struggle with trying to attach it to this particular piece, which is, as Councillor Patterson described. Really, we are trying to implement the housing needs that we have, and frankly, they're important. Right? I think it's really important. We've done this small scale multi-unit, but I think there are many places that those are in place that we probably should be looking at higher density, and we want to move those along as quickly as possible so that we're not losing perfectly good multifamily land for fourplexes. So I can't support it here, but I really want to have that conversation with the community. I will also say I don't think it's the land use planning should be divisive. I haven't really heard that much. I've certainly seen some. There's certainly some concerns about the ramifications of the provincial legislation. But I really appreciate the thoughtfulness around this table that we've worked within those bounds and still tried to find solutions that reflect the community needs. And I expect that same process to happen in this case as well, where we're doing that. So thank you. Any other discussion before I call the question? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Smart.
I just want to thank everyone for sharing where they're at with that. And I do hear what you're all saying, and I think it's just, for me, it's exactly what Councillor Green said. I too have no idea what the community would say about what they want in 25 years. And so I just have so much trouble imagining going through an OCP process when we don't know that. But I hear what everyone's saying.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Have Councillor Green, Watson, Braithwaite, Patterson, and myself opposed. That resolution fails. I'm assuming since the other one was sort of attached to it, that's the visioning piece. Does that die with it as well, Councillor Smart?
I will put forward the motion separately, although I imagine it may have the same response from council because they may consider it additional work, but I will put forward a motion with regards to adding the scope of reconciliation planning to the OCP process.
And looking around for a seconder. I don't see a seconder on that one. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Smart. That work is very important and ongoing, but just not part of the OCP, I think, in the minds here, so thank you. All right, with that, I have a motion that's been amended to include the communications and engagement plan coming back here. I have a speaking list of, I don't think I do, but Councillor Patterson.
I have amendments to make.
Okay.
Much simpler amendments, hopefully. Page 15, amend the project sign-off section 1, clause 1.4 by adding sustainable funding plan dated September 2021 to the list of strategic policy framework documents that are listed. And section 2, clause 2.2.4, work area 3, amend section 1 by adding sustainable funding plan September 2021 to the first section listing reports and plans.
Those are straightforward. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. I don't think you even need motivation for those, just to include them as reference documents in the interest of time. So unless there's anybody else who has questions or wishes to discuss it, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
One more for council to consider. Section 5.1, internal and external stakeholders, amend by deleting Urban Development Institute from the list of community interest groups.
Seconded. Do you wish to speak to that, Councillor Patterson?
Yes, I can. For community interest groups, if you look at the Urban Development Annual Report 2023-2024, it lists their main business as being advocacy, and lobbying levels of government. And so because that is stated clearly in their annual report, and in fact, in the last 18 months alone, the 5 pieces of provincial housing legislation, as they say, have required intense and ongoing engagement from their board, committees, and staff, and they intend to grow the federal advocacy efforts. So I think that that it doesn't necessarily align with a community stakeholder group. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't allow them, of course, to speak to whatever we do, but not list them with the community stakeholder groups.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to encourage us not to spend a lot of time on this one. I think this comes down to personal take on this, but I had Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Just speaking to the motion, I just wanted clarification on whether there was going to be a replacement for developers in general, or if you're, in a sense, you said delete, striking off the list consultation with developers. Could you please clarify?
Well, just that, yeah, I would, Mayor, through you. And it is just that one identified group. Certainly, there will be the development community itself can participate as stakeholders in what we are doing in this community. But because UDI is actually, their mandate is as a lobbyist, and I think we recognize them as a lobbyist and not a community stakeholder group.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Other discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be supporting the motion if it doesn't replace with another. The problem is that UDI is the only large organized group of developers in town. And while I truly do understand the lobbying concerns as well as some of the advocacy concerns with the group, developers are building the buildings and the housing that we need. And I'm really concerned with the potential exclusion of, in general, possibly consulting less with the development community, because if I appreciate the fact that our government is now standing up and being in charge of building more housing, but we rely on developers to be our community builders. And I have concern with the motion as it stands, because I think we need to be partners with our development community because they are helping to build our community.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just briefly, I concur with Councillor Smart in that regard.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll keep my comments very brief. I'm not going to support the motion. I get the intention of it, and I think we do have to recognize the bounds of that. Realistically, the UDI will almost certainly provide some feedback, and I think if we include them as one of the lists, certainly this is not an exclusive list, it provides us the framework to kind of set the tone of that and the scope of that conversation. If we just invite sort of external, then we don't even control that. So in my mind, to this end, we have a good sense of what they are, as well as all the other groups listed there. They've all got their own interests. That's not to guide us; it's just to inform us. So I'm okay with them being listed as part of that. For my personal thing, but I fully understand this is a personal feeling on the inclusion. So there we are. Any other discussion on the motion, which is currently to strike that one group from the list of named stakeholders? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, and those opposed. Councillor Watson, Councillor Smart, and myself opposed, so that fails on a 3-3 tie. Any other? Councillor Patterson, no? Any other discussion on the motion that's in front of us, which is, as I said, the original but amended to include community engagement? Report back? No. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? That carries it. That took a little longer than I was expecting, but there we go. That's the piece. We are back to engineering. I see we have our Director of Engineering, Director and Manager of Public Works here with us. Item number 7.1. This section is not for public input, so it's just a report with a tender award. I'm not sure who I should hand this over to, Mr. Brozuk or Mr. Robertson. Certainly not Ms. Williams. There's the name tag facing me, or was. Mr. Robertson.
Good evening. Thank you for the chance to speak to this. Just very briefly, we're here to recommend the award of the tender as outlined in the report for the replacement of one small garbage packer. The amount noted there. It's within our fleet and equipment replacement budget for 2024 and is slightly below what we had estimated the replacement would be. And it's here because it's over our staff signing limit to have that approved. And we're here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to questions first, and then we'll give motions. Go ahead, Councillor Watson, Patterson, and then Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Just one very quick question from Mr. Robertson, please. I'm curious to what extent, when you have to get a piece of equipment like this custom designed, to what extent are the garbage cans that it's accessing uniform in style or design, or does that really matter, or is that one of the design considerations?
Mr. Robertson?
Through the mayor, yes, because this vehicle can accommodate the cans that are currently there that we have to hand lift, but our goal over a period is to replace the receptacles that we have out on the street so that they can be wheeled to the vehicle, and the vehicle has a lifting mechanism to be able to tip it, and that we've had a couple of WorkSafe BC claims for lifting injuries, wrist, things like that. So this would get us in the direction of equipment that doesn't require all that manual lifting.
Please continue.
And just a brief follow-up, how many, how many receptacles are there that need to be cleared using this? Like, are there hundreds of them around the community, or I have no idea?
Mr. Robertson? Mr. Brozuk? I'm not sure who would answer
Mr.
that.
Brozuk is telling me, and it's in here somewhere, but 201 is what we currently have.
Thank you, that's everything.
Thank you. Patterson, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Smart.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you to our Director of Engineering and our Superintendent of Public Works. Nice to see you both here today. The new vehicle that we are planning on purchasing, I know that there has been discussion about changing some of the receptacles, particularly in public areas like Willows Beach, so that they would be divided into waste or recycling. And so will this vehicle be equipped with separate compartments so that that would be done, or is it's still kind of like the same manual system we have now?
Go ahead, Mr. Robertson.
Yeah, through the mayor, we have not spec'd this truck to be divided bins. If that's somewhere where council wishes us to go in the future, we would either look at, depending on the volume of, could be recycles get picked up one day a week and the garbage is picked up the other 4, but using the same vehicle. Or if the volume is such, we would have a separate vehicle that would do the recycling. The problem with the split is the garbage fills up much quicker than the recycling, and so you've got a weight disparity and how big the bin needs to be. So we're better to go with a dedicated vehicle, and if we did go that way, if the volume was there, we would be looking at a separate vehicle to do recycling collection. And with those issues, there's a whole lot of things to be considered as far as that type of collection goes in the back end of what do we do with that material, contaminated material, how do you separate it, where do you separate it, all those things would have to be investigated.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, I wondered if you could clarify how this vehicle is fueled, and whether it's gas, diesel, or electric. And if it is not electric, I wondered if you could briefly discuss where you're at in the potential electrification of the vehicle fleet. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson.
Through the mayor, this vehicle is spec'd as diesel, as I believe the current one is. We didn't look at other options for powering the vehicle. We've had some discussions around electrification of the fleet, but there's a lot of work that would have to go into doing that sort of analysis. We would have to do, first of all, hire a consultant to do a full analysis of the fleet itself and what all the functions are, what type of equipment, what's available on the market, all those type of things. Then we would have, once we know what the potential is for electrification, how much of the fleet, because some of the vehicles are quite specialized, and it's at this right now it's unlikely that there are electric options for a few of them. Then we'd have to hire an electrical engineer to do a review of the public works yard and its capacity for charging stations, and even just the physical layout of the yard of where those stations would be and the sort of draw that it would be. And then we would be at a place to bring to council what that would cost to do, And then as replacements come up, we would be able to we would have the background in place to be able to support purchase of electric vehicles. And one other thing I've left out is there's also a matter of additional training for our mechanical staff to be able to work on electric vehicles and additional equipment to be able to work on vehicles. So there's a number of steps, and I believe with the new climate action position, I think that the review, those type of review things are something that is contemplated in their work plan.
Smart.
Yeah, thank you. And I thank you for laying that all out. I really appreciate it. There are we have so many neighboring municipalities that are well into this adventure now, and my understanding is that the vehicles are almost at cost comparative prices, and then you look at the life cycle benefits of owning electric vehicles. And I understand that BC Hydro is currently offering a 50% grant for both the planning, a 50% grant for the infrastructure, as well as pilot programs. And so I guess I'm wondering, why is Oak Bay potentially so far behind in the times of what seems like an inevitable transition?
Why questions are always hard. Staff to answer, but Mr. Robertson, I'll give you a chance.
Yes. Through the mayor, matter of resources to be able to do that. And as I understand, this new staffing resource will help us get there, and it's well timed with having those grant opportunities coming. But having been involved with this at the City of Victoria, we had 3 dedicated people within fleet manager, and then a financial resource, and also then a procurement resource. And to my left is our fleet resource, and Dave does a great job, but he has the whole of Public Works to operate and oversee. And so I think, so I'm a supporter of that, and I've been a part of that. But I think it's just a matter of having resources to be able to get all those pieces done so that we could procure, and to procure with confidence that industry is at a place where they can supply the type of vehicles. If we were just, the low-hanging fruit, of course, is things like pickup trucks and vehicles, passenger vehicles. But we still need the charging infrastructure and the training and the equipment to be able to maintain them. So it's finding it. One other thing I'll mention is that the City of Victoria is buying a similar vehicle. They actually did a lot of the speccing on this, and Mr. Brozuk's been working with them on that. They're also not going with electric for this vehicle. It seems like most of the development so far has been in the larger garbage packers for the residential programs, and this is an area that hasn't had as much development to it, but it's inevitable that it'll happen in time.
Councillor Smart, good. I don't have anybody else on my speaking list.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed?
And I'll move the staff recommendation.
This is a recommendation to approve the purchase. Any discussion on that, Councillor Smart?
I'd like to move amendment to the motion.
Please go ahead.
An amendment that staff bring to council a work plan for the new council priority projects outlining the planning process for future electrification of municipal vehicle fleets, taking advantage of the current BC
I'm just going
Hydro.
to interrupt you for a second. I'm going to do it as a motion arising, not as an amendment.
Okay.
Because the amendment here is going to be very clear about what we're actually approving.
Okay.
So, yeah, thank you. So the motion is unamended at this point in front of us. Councillor Green?
Just a comment, we are a small municipality, under 18,000 people, and our infrastructure is challenged because of the fact that we don't have the resources of larger communities. And I think we have to give staff full credit for exploring these options. I don't think we're behind. I think we're just trying to catch up. And I really know that staff puts a lot into their consideration of new technology and so on. But electrification of large vehicles like this is not perfect. It's still an imperfect science, and the infrastructure is hugely expensive. So I would like to say that I appreciate the work that you're doing now, and I realize that you're fully aware of what is out there. So I think that's important for us to emphasize.
So speaking in favor of the motion.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other hands. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Then, oh, sorry, Councillor Smart opposed. And you, just a motion arising then, you wish to just add, include a, go ahead, I'll let you just read it out.
Yeah, thank you. And I have provided this, the wording to staff in advance. The motion is that staff bring to council a work plan for the new council priority project outlining the planning process for future electrification of municipal vehicle fleets, taking advantage of the current BC Hydro grant programs.
Ask for a seconder. I just want to make sure we get the wording right on this one, because this is really like a council, and I'm having a mental blank here about the wording. This has come back to our priorities session coming up very soon. That would include some high level costing and et cetera attached to that. So that's the intent here? Okay, thank you. So if this motion passes, it wouldn't approve doing this work. It would essentially direct staff to include that as one of the council priority projects for consideration in this fall. Is that staff's understanding as well? I just want to turn to, we have Ms. Williams and Ms. Plouffe here to. Okay, Mr. Boel.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have some information for you on this topic. Let me see here. As part of the upcoming work for climate action planning, there's a number of items that were listed last year in a report to Council that would be followed up on in that context. And let me see. It might be included in there. Let me see. We do intend to provide you with a project sign-off for that implementation plan, so to say, work plan for the climate planner. So, so in that sense, it could come up. I think maybe a separate project background would not necessarily be needed, but maybe if Ms. Williams has anything to add here, that would be.
We're just wondering if maybe the motion would be more appropriate. I'm turning to you, Councillor Smart, if you think it's to maybe just be direct that. The electrification, the fleet electrification, or whatever the wording you want to use there, be included as one of the options that the climate thing brings back as part of their work plan.
I would be happy to do that, although this was upon direction of the CAO's recommendation.
Okay. We have the CAO here, Ms. Williams. I just hearing what Mr. Boel had to say here. I'm okay with the wording as it is. I mean, if the report comes back with that priority session and it says this is better dealt with within that priority plan, that would be fine. So I don't want to spend a lot of time tonight trying to wordsmith this, but Ms. Williams, is there anything you wish to add? You're live. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. My apologies. I haven't been on Zoom for a while, so I'm not sure where all the signals are anymore. Yes, I did provide some information. Thank you, Councillor Smart. As a follow-up to that, you might not have picked up your email. The project that you're outlining tonight in your resolution is included in the climate action work that was approved by Council last September. So we anticipate that any of those initiatives that were included in that report that are significant in nature, they will require a project backgrounder with some sign-off. So the initiative for the planned electric vehicle fleet purchases and related infrastructure will include an option for Council to expand on its fleet electrification with options for Council at that time. I'm hoping that's helpful. Basically, what I'm saying is the resolution on the table, with the exception of the inclusion of the BC Hydro grants, is included in the Climate Action Coordinator's work plan. And of course, we are always looking for grants through our Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think it actually doesn't matter whether we approve the resolution as it is or we don't. So I'm happy, Councillor Smart, really up to you. If you want to just leave it on the table, we can call the question and have a bit more debate on it. Or if you feel comfortable with that answer, then we'll leave it there. It hasn't been seconded yet, but I just wanted to give you the chance here.
Yeah, I'll see if there's a seconder for the motion.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay, it sounds like the work's being done, so I think it's a comfort level here that that work is underway actively will be with the Climate Action Coordinator, so great. Thank you for raising that, though. Certainly the point about the hydro grants is very, very informative. Anything else? Sorry, didn't want to rush past this one. I had the one motion arising. Okay, moving on then to Section 8. We have 2 Heritage Revitalization Agreement in front of us. First up is 1318 Transit Road. Mr. McStravick, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. In this item, Council is being asked to consider an application for a Heritage Revitalization Agreement for the property located at 1318 Transit Road. This HRA relates to the Glengyle House, which the applicants wish to modify by adding a rental suite to the ground level and through a subdivision of 3 new residential lots from the eastern half of the property. These 3 lots would be developed with fee simple townhouses. Council most recently considered this application at their regular meeting of June the 10th, 2024, and at that meeting passed a resolution directing staff to prepare bylaws to further the application. A Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw and a Heritage Designation bylaw have both been prepared, and the question before Council tonight is whether to give first and second readings to both bylaws and to direct staff to schedule a public hearing for the same. I want to just take a brief moment to note a typographical error in my report, and under the recommendations section, I just mentioned giving first reading to the bylaw, but at the options section at the end of the report, I note correctly that it is up for first and second reading, if Council wishes. So we have with us tonight Carolyn Wilson, architect on the project, and online Matthew Waymar, the property owner. They're both available if Council has any questions, and I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McStravick. Yes, and certainly this has gone through Council previously for pieces, so this is taking the direction from Council, putting it into a bylaw. So process tonight would be, if it meets the needs of Council, to go first and second reading, and then schedule a public hearing for public input. The reason we don't have public input tonight on this, as we do for anything, is because it requires a public hearing. We have the public input at the public hearing, so there's a single point for all people to provide public input on any application. So with that, are there any questions from members of Council on this? Councillor Smart?
Well, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just one small question to staff. If you could remind me with regards to the what's called a community park on the plan, but I believe we talked about last time that was, potentially not in the scope of this project. Could you just remind me if there's new work occurring in that area that is labeled as a community park, the public way? Is that part of the agreement at all?
Mr. McStravick, referring to Brighton there. Go ahead.
Thank you, through your worship. That land is, in fact, part of the Brighton Road right-of-way, and it functions as a community green space, but it is not dedicated parkland, and it is not proposed to become such through this application. It did come up at a previous council meeting, though, and it did form part of the recommendation from the Heritage Commission to look more closely at that, and the information I received from our Parks Department was that, from Engineering Public Works, was that there is a broader project to look at the Brighton Greenway, which will be coming forward to Council in some form or another in the not too distant future, but it remains separate from this specific application.
Thank you, Mr. McStravick. Don't see any other questions, and not having public input, I will happily turn to Council for
receipts.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Debate receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed?
And I'll move that Council give first and second reading to 1318 Transit Road Heritage Revitalization Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 4880-2024 and 1318 Transit Road Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4882-2024.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? Thank you. I think we made comments at the last time when this was in front of Council. We appreciate the thoughtfulness of this application and incorporation of all the thoughts. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed, not opposed? And then public
And then
hearing.
I'll move that Council direct staff to schedule a date on which a public hearing may be held for the proposed bylaws.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed, not opposed? That carries. All done. You waited for an hour, almost 2 hours for that, but there you go. Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay around for the next item. The next item and the last item of scheduled business tonight is another Heritage Revitalization Agreement, not quite as far along in the process, for 1587 York Place and 1562 Prospect Place. Mr. McStravick, all yours once again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this item, Council is being asked to consider an application again for Heritage Revitalization Agreements within the Prospect Heritage Conservation Area, as you noted, for the properties located at 1587 York Place and 1562 Prospect Place. This HRA would facilitate a revitalization of the Annandale House, a conversion of that house into a 4-unit strata, and the relocation of that structure within the site. The proposal also includes a subdivision to create 2 new lots from the subject properties and the creation of new residential dwellings on those 2 lots. Council most recently considered this application at their regular meeting of the 22nd of April, 2024, and at that meeting, Council passed a resolution providing feedback to the applicants. The question before Council tonight is whether to further the application by directing staff to draft bylaws for the application, a Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw, as well as whether or not to schedule a public hearing for the application. The applicants and the proponents are here tonight. Again, if Council has any questions for them, and I will leave it with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As noted by Mr. McStravick, this came before us last in April, so the applicant is here. So is there anything that Mr. Collins, if you wish to identify anything you want to kind of just highlight for us here before we get, and we can go to any questions from members of Council. I think it's probably worth a little bit of a refresh just to understand. This has been before us, I think it's the 3rd time, if my memory serves me correctly, last time in April, so perhaps just some explanation of what's different this time around and what's being brought forward.
Okay.
And then really, we've all read these in great detail, but maybe just for the benefit of the community at large.
Right.
Welcome. Oh, we can just state your name. Oh, firstly, for the record, I already named you.
Sure. Rus Collins.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wish to start off with before we go to questions? Oh, you have
Well,
a
we have a presentation we'd like to do, if that's okay.
Sure. Yes.
And Oak Bay Council members. I'm the lead designer for Zebra Design, and I have been working with our clients since 2022 on the Heritage Revitalization Agreement for the home known as Annandale and the surrounding property on York Place. After being referred back to staff by Council at the time of our last presentation of this project in April 2024, the owner was very discouraged, and I have felt compelled to try to bring the proposal back again with revisions, and I convinced our client to try one more time. My concern is that we are going to lose this opportunity if the house falls too far into disrepair. My gut feeling is that if we want something to happen on this property, now is our chance. And this opportunity is quickly evaporating due to the cumulative and mounting costs and continual deferrals of maintenance. I firmly believe that you have a great proposal in front of you now, and this is the time to get the project to move forward. The last time we came before Council in April 2024, you asked us to modify the proposal and explore several other possibilities. I wasn't at that meeting, but I have watched the video, and since then I've taken it upon myself to speak with Oak Bay councillors and the mayor to discuss options that we have with the proposal, and to determine whether there truly is an appetite to see this project come to fruition and receive approval. What I heard from those that I spoke with was, yes, there was. So one of the concerns I heard mentioned by some members of council was about moving the Heritage House. However, this is not an unprecedented practice. Throughout the Victoria area, there are many examples of Heritage House relocation projects, some of which have been moved more than one time. So here are a few case examples of successful projects in the capital region that allowed for rehabilitation and relocation of heritage homes. So this is a slide showing 222 and 226 Dallas Road. These particular homes, now on Dallas Road, were moved to this location in collaboration with Joel Properties and Concert Properties to facilitate the Capitol Park, also referred to as South Block Project in James Bay. The house on the right was relocated more than once, first from Superior Street to Michigan Street in 1910, and then to Dallas Road in 2016, along with the home beside it, also relocated from Michigan Street. Next slide. That's it. This is 580, 584, and 588 Michigan Street. These three 1891 homes were relocated from nearby locations on Superior Street. They were also moved in 2016, and the three now exist side by side on Michigan Street, also part of the Capitol Park development. This is 1263 Richardson Street, sometimes known as Green Gables. This home on Richardson Street was previously located near Langham Court on Rockland Avenue, but the house was moved in 1889 and then designated in 1990. It is a Gothic Revival building, and its current location allowed for infill townhouse development behind it. This is 1952 Runnymede on Avenue at Foul Bay. You might recognize this one. It's named the Wynn Yates, and it was previously located at 804 Foul Bay, a Swiss chalet and arts and crafts style house from 1912. This home was going to be demolished, but after a subdivision was applied for and approved, we at Zebra consulted with Victoria's heritage planner, who said saving it was absolutely worthwhile. And so, on this slide, you'll see that the house, the first lot that we're looking at right there, shows the previous location of the house on the lot before subdivision. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're showing the 4-lot subdivision that we got approval for, with the house straddling the 4 lots. And so with permission and talking with the heritage planner and also the approval of council, we got to move the house onto one of the lots. We asked for some variances to have it moved there, but the house was then restored and designated heritage. The next one is on Pemberton Road, known as Pemberton Court. This Italianate Heritage Registered House was relocated from the southwest corner of Richmond Road and Oak Bay Avenue, and has been in its new Pemberton Road location since 2012, allowing for its continued multi-suite residential use and also allowing for multi-unit residential development, the Madison, at its previous location at 1082 Richmond Road. And by the way, this house had to be moved in 2 pieces. So a little closer to home, you might not be aware that there used to be a carriage house on the York Place property. The Queen Anne Revival style building was in terrible state of disrepair, but was an architectural style that matched with a private owner's home at 230 Robert Street in Vic West. The carriage house was donated by Mike Miller to the homeowner. The carriage house was carefully disassembled and moved across town with the approval of consulting heritage experts and city heritage staff to be rebuilt in a different, already established City Victoria Heritage Conservation area. So it has now been fully rehabilitated as a functioning garden suite at 230 Robert Street. And I find it hard to believe that anyone here tonight could tell me that these projects have not had positive outcomes. All of these houses I've just shown you still remain in use. One can look them up on heritage information sites, and all the historic information is right there for us. They are a valuable part of our local history, and we want to keep them, and that is why they were moved, so they can continue to contribute their character and presence in their new neighborhoods and areas. So next, we're going to look at a few heritage rehabilitation examples that Mike and I have been involved in. So the first one is 1416 St. David. This Dutch colonial revival house on St. David was the subject of an HRA and included rehabilitation, the legalization of 3 suites, and heritage designation. This project was somewhat controversial at the time of the approval, as suites were not yet allowed in Oak Bay, but since completion there is overwhelming support for the outcome. This project was a passion project for the owner, as it was her family home, and Zebra Group did this project. Next slide, at 1020 Edgecliff Place. Edgecliff was previously 925 Foul Bay Road. It's an arts and crafts Tudor revival home from 1910. It was part of a rehabilitation and subdivision by Mike and Zebra Design. It was voluntarily heritage designated by Mike in 2008. Next slide. Perfect. This is 1770 Rockland Avenue. It's Biggerstaff Wilson House. This was also done by Mike and Zebra, another Tudor revival house by McClure. It was built in 1905 and heritage designated in 1982. The new owners wanted to rehabilitate the manor, so they selected Mike as their builder and Zebra as their designers. Next slide. So this is the Boyd residence at 644 Beach Drive, a Georgian revival McClure house. The rehabilitation and subdivision were HRA, where Mike and Zebra Design again worked together, and it was designated in 2018. Now this one is 480 Dunmore Court. It was built in 1922. It's a Tudor revival style home. This was another HRA done by Mike, Zebra Design, and a couple of other partners in around 2010. I could go on, there are many more, but the three main points I'm trying to demonstrate to you with all of this are A, heritage houses get moved to different properties and then designated and or rehabilitated. It's not uncommon. Heritage registered and heritage designated houses get moved, relocated, or turned on their own lots as well. And Zebra Design and Mike Miller have been involved in many heritage rehabilitation and designation projects over a long period of time, and we're experienced and have a long-standing reputation for doing this. So regarding the heritage designation of Annandale, I would like to remind you that a previous council forced the designation of Annandale decades ago in 1997. That heritage designation has done nothing to protect this house from disrepair and degradation. The long-deferred maintenance and repairs are now the responsibility of the current owner. Heritage designation is intended to be a tool to protect our heritage homes, and in this case it is manifested as neglect, and the result is that Annandale is a rundown shell of its previous self. The previous owner of Annandale either did not have the means or the will to take care of the home, despite that she applied to Oak Bay multiple times for subdivision, which would have provided the funds necessary to improve and maintain the house. Her attempts were unsuccessful and the home deteriorated as a result. I'd like to specifically point out the very intentional decision of council at the time in 1997 that the heritage designation was only for the Annandale house itself, not the land surrounding it. In fact, the Oak Bay Community Heritage Commission of the time explicitly stated that the site needed maximum flexibility for subdivision, infill, and other changes to make the property financially viable for preservation in the future, and so did not recommend designating the lands. That same council encouraged the previous owner to enter into an HRA as it would give her the potential to increase density of use for the house while still protecting its heritage merits, but she declined to do so. There seems to have been a disconnect preventing a positive outcome back then. So Annandale was very unsafe when acquired by the current owners, and the stopgap measures were needed to address safety issues. Even currently, many of the porch railings are gone. The outside is weathering rapidly, the yard unlandscaped, and the structure is continuing to decline. However, with an HRA for Annandale, we could change that. An HRA has teeth. It's a win-win for the community, municipality, and homeowners, and it will protect the house into the future. After the rehabilitation, the financial responsibility of maintenance transfers to any new owners along with the land title. The climate for infill housing has changed in recent years, and this proposal is well positioned to assist with meeting current housing targets and preserve an important local heritage home at the same time. This is a unique opportunity, albeit a quickly eroding one, as the house is continuing to deteriorate, but this HRA could provide an actual guarantee to maintain this building far into the future. Next slide. So this, we're just using this landscape plan because I want to demonstrate that there are two existing lots involved in this proposal, each being subdivided, which will result in 4 lots. Next slide. So originally, in 2023, our proposal included the rotation of the heritage home and the removal of the west wing of Annandale. We proposed to rehabilitate the heritage home as a single-family home with a detached 2-car garage at the rear of the lot, and we designed a contemporary single-family house for Lot 2. We proposed to convert the already constructed contemporary garage on Lot 3 to a single-family home. The Lot 4 home was already under construction, so there was a single-family home proposed for each lot, totaling 4 dwelling units. Council recommended that we try for more density and diversity of housing, requested that Lot 2 have a more traditional design, and desired us to preserve more trees. Slide this one here. So, version 2, streetscape and the traditional duplex. In our second application, responding to Council's requests for increased density and a more heritage-sympathetic design for Lot 2, we proposed 4 suites in the heritage home, one which was under the house in a basement level, and a duplex with traditional form and detailing for Lot 2, with a garage that was dug down into the ground. The duplex design included secondary suites as well. So there were 4 units in Annandale, 1 downstairs, 4 units in the duplex, plus the conversion on Lot 3. Annandale on Lot 1 still had a detached garage at the back. The home was rotated from its current orientation, and the west wing was proposed to be removed. So in response to this second proposal in April 2024, Council again asked us to reconsider how the project could achieve a number of different things. And so after lengthy consideration and discussions, we've gone back to the drawing board and overhauled this proposal again, making a number of changes, some significant. One of those requests from Council was to investigate townhouse or campus site layout strategies. We listened to this request and we tried exploring it. I've honestly tried dozens of site layouts with townhouses around Annandale. However, it resulted in greater site coverage, more paving, less green space, and fewer trees. So the existing garage for conversion, we just want to talk about Lot 3. This garage already has been constructed. It doesn't make any sense to put parking for other buildings in and around it. The structure is a very interesting design with its full-length glass wall. It will make a room, and the house will contribute stylistically to the whole array of homes here. We need to keep that building. It makes this project more financially feasible, as it was very expensive to construct, and it would be wasteful to remove it. We've also gone to look at other heritage relocation projects with surrounding townhouses that were proposed in the City of Victoria. Putting townhouses around Annandale, in my humble opinion, is not the best approach. This particular block is a detached single-family dwelling neighborhood, and the homes have had an ongoing relationship with Annandale. I feel strongly that our proposal is the right thing to do design-wise. The detached dwelling and duplex are well suited to the neighborhood context and residential fabric on York Place, and the overall gain in number of residences, 9 dwellings total, will provide additional density that is appropriate and needed. One of the other important takeaways from the last council meeting was about the trees on the site, which council asked us to increase. I do want to mention that the way we presented the tree information last time did not represent the overall big picture, as we had neglected to factor in the trees that we were retaining on Lot 3 and 4. Instead, we were focusing only on Lots 1 and 2, and basically we were not removing as many trees as you may have had the impression of, but we have improved the tree retention since then. So this demonstrates the trees that are on the property that we're retaining up at the top. The center line shows us the ones that we're actually removing. I can't read how. Mine's too small to read. Can you read that?
Yeah.
Just tell us how many we're keeping and how many we're taking out.
Yeah, hello, Council. So that center line, as Russ was discussing, is showing how many trees we're actually going to be removing. And then at the very bottom, that graphic illustrates exactly how many trees we're proposing to replace and to plant. As you can see, the total amount of trees that we're removing is going to be significantly smaller than the total amount of trees that we're still keeping on site. And at the end of this entire landscaping plan, we're looking at planting over 140 total proposed new trees. So if this decides to go through, by the end of this HRA, you're looking at significantly more tree coverage. You're looking at significantly more individual trees on the site as well.
Okay, go on to the next slide. So we have also redesigned the parking and driveway approach for Lot 2 duplex, raising the floor level of the garages. This change will reduce the amount of blasting required and preserve additional Gary oak trees. Council requested that we diversify the housing options, which we have done by offering to register a covenant on the secondary suites in each side of the duplex to ensure that they remain as affordable rental housing. We're also proposing an informative historic plaque about Annandale that will be introduced for the York Place streetscape to be mounted on the Heritage Rock Wall. But lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we heard very strong messaging from Council about the retention of the west wing of Annandale, which we have now adopted our proposal to fully include. And I'll show you how we've achieved that. So this is a rendering of the rear of Annandale showing the west wing being kept on the house. In the current version of the application, one of the most important issues to address was the west wing of Annandale, which we proposed to remove in both the previous applications. But in this proposal, we've added back the west wing, removing the lower level dwelling unit that was going to be in the basement before, and bringing it to the main floor and upper floor of this wing. This will have the added benefit of improving the livability of the unit and increasing natural light, etc. So we have removed the detached garage from the back of Lot 1 and put a 3-car garage under the west wing, now the east wing. Yeah. The side of the house currently facing east is the main original entry elevation, and it commands visual attention. When the house was first built, the approach to the home was from a different aspect. So the original road access no longer exists, and York Place is the only street that has a view corridor to the house now. But Annandale currently has had its back to the street, and it's out of context. So by turning the house to face York Place, we get an opportunity to celebrate the real front of Annandale, with its wide veranda, roof lines, and entry door. Our heritage consultant, Dr. Katie Coomer, supports this concept of rotating the house's position. When we started on this HRA, another heritage consultant was brought on to assist us. He had to excuse himself from the role of consultant for personal reasons, but he also supported rotating the house. Here is a rendering through the same historic gates from York Place of the proposed new view of Annandale's traditional main entrance facade. This home is referred to in some materials as one of the most important heritage homes in Oak Bay. It deserves to be seen as a local jewel and have its presence showcased in the streetscape and the neighborhood. We hope that you can see how natural this will look and how much better access the public will have to views of the building in its proposed new position. So in conclusion, the benefits of this proposal are numerous. The HRA will legally lock in a maintenance covenant for Annandale, and there would be 4 families contributing to that. But this opportunity could be lost. The house may soon be beyond repair. We are at a pivotal moment, uniquely positioned to leverage this project in a way that I think we would have a very hard time duplicating. Mike is a direct neighbor of this project, part of this community. He's also has the experience, interest, and vision to see this project through. We would all benefit from this project becoming a heritage success story. The community is going to see life breathed back into this historic heritage home. It will stay in the neighborhood with its character and beautiful front facade showcased and will be elevated in terms of visibility to the public. And there's the added benefit of new and appropriate density increases, which at the same time maintain a detached residential feel in the streetscape. These 2 lots would become 4, and 9 new dwelling units would be achieved with this proposal. Zebra Design and Mike Miller jointly have a lot of experience with and a passion for heritage projects, and we are not entering into this endeavor lightly or without forethought. We are motivated to make sure that this project has an outstanding result for the community, the municipality, and the residents nearby. This could be a positive change, and Mike is fueled by the challenge of the Annandale project that so far no one else has endeavored to take on. I'm asking Council to make this HRA a reality. We need to celebrate and honor this building as well as increase housing opportunities in the neighborhood. I thank you for your time and listening to my presentation, and hope you can support moving the revised proposal forward with these changes. And if you have any questions, I'd obviously be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Collins, and I'm sure we have some questions from members of council, so I'll go. if we wish to seek public input, the process would be to go to a public hearing and seek that input. Or if, of course, if there's any specific direction back, we can provide that as well tonight. But I'll turn it to this table. So, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you to Mr. Collins or to our planner, Mr. Stuyvik. Someone has mentioned affordable. Can you define affordable in this particular context? I think it's, it's difficult, I think, for some of us to get our heads around affordability for a project of this magnitude in this area. Thank you.
Mr. McStravick.
Thank you, through your worship. It was discussed briefly in the report, but what the exact arrangement would be for these proposed affordable units remains to be determined, and staff would work with the applicants to find something suitably manageable and effective if council wished to move forward with it. If I recall correctly, the applicants in their memorandum, which is attached to this report, proposed an arrangement where the rent would be geared to a specific CMHC definition of affordability tied to the average incomes in the area. Another alternative would be to target a certain percentage below average rents in the area. There's different ways to approach it, and we haven't put in the work to determine what the best option would be in this case as of yet.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. That was very loud. It's okay. We need to be woken up occasionally. It's all good. Are there other questions for the applicant or staff? Sorry, I had Councillor Patterson and then Watson.
Yes, thank you, and certainly Councillor Green got probably the most notable question in first, so I appreciate that information. And I also want to thank staff for the report. It's pretty comprehensive and well done, and certainly takes us through the iterative process that we have been going through on this. I did notice that there was a recommendation from the Parks Department to, instead of planting the number of trees, to consider planting larger specimens that would have a better chance of surviving, and of course give an extra boost to making it look more mature at the start. And I'm wondering if the applicant has taken that into consideration and would like to comment.
Sure. We just got that report today, so let me see where this. So there was a response from our landscape designer and architect saying that we understand that planting Gary oak trees closer together with less soil volume than typical urban landscape tree plantings might seem conventional. This unique planting design is intended to enhance the rural character of York Place. By planting new Gary oaks in clusters, we aim to recreate a natural Gary oak stand of trees, fostering a diverse and more naturalized landscape as the trees mature and compete for resources. Additionally, we plan to clear areas with existing invasive plant species and replace them with native Gary oak woodland species to better support the Gary oak and associated ecosystems. In our proposal, we suggest planting some Gary oaks at larger caliper sizes, while others will be potted, promoting Gary oak succession using plants of varying ages and seed stock. We are open to collaborating with planning and parks to align the design with the tree replacement bylaw, enhance existing Gary oak habitat, and add new areas of Gary oak habitat that will thrive for generations to come. So the intention is to work with parks and come up with something that they're happy with, and but at the same time try to accomplish what we were trying to accomplish with the Gary Oak Meadow.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Watson.
Thank you. I just have, through you, Mayor, a couple of process questions to staff, to Mr. McStravick, just about timing and elements. One is with respect to the Dr. Kummer's Heritage Conservation Plan, which the one in the report is dated, the one she originally prepared, April of 2023, which would, I guess, be superseded with the retention of the West Wing. So I just wanted to ask, when would an updated plan be required? Or if one actually would be required?
Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, through your worship. That's an excellent point. The project from a heritage standpoint probably has been improved by the proposal to retain that west wing, and I agree it would be appropriate to ask the heritage consultants to revisit their report, but I don't think any such changes stemming from that would be too significant in terms of the impact on the project. And as to when it would be appropriate to have them do so, I should think that prior to public hearing, so that council and the public have that complete information at that point.
Thank you for that. And yes, I do agree. I don't think it furthers much what's in the plan because it talks about the details of doing the restoration, but it is an element that's mentioned in the plan, which has changed, I guess, quite significantly with the most recent iteration. And then I'm just curious about the Section 219 covenant and also the timing of working through this idea of how you actually would achieve 2 affordable rental units in a building that is a duplex where the rental units are sort of a part of owned property. So what's your sense of the timing of when that kind of gets explored, again, pre or post public hearing? It could be quite tricky. I think it's a really excellent sort of proposition, but it's just, the devil may be in the details. So I just wondered about that.
McStravick?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. Again, those details should be finalized prior to public hearing so that there wouldn't be the possibility of having new information introduced subsequent to public hearing, and so that council and the public had the totality of the package they're being asked to consider. So likely there would be a gap, an interval of time between when staff were directed to work on these bylaws and when they were brought back to council for first and second reading. And as we iron out those details, the tree plan potentially subject to change, Dr. Kuma's report potentially subject to change, and further details about the affordable housing are to be worked out. I would think it's likely that this would come back with a first reading report to explain those details as they get ironed out closer towards the time of public hearing.
Thank you very much. That's everything. Other than that, I just would like to just reiterate what Councillor Patterson said. I thought the staff report was excellent in bringing us up from the original application to the present day and explaining how at least staff felt the current proposal addresses Council's previous requests. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Other questions for applicant or staff? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Mr. Collins. It's very easy to see that you're very passionate. I will say that I'm feeling a bit disregarded. Last time you guys were here, Mr. Holland had said that he'd spoken to a number of council members, but not me. And now you've come and said that you've spoken to a number of council members, but not me. So I'm feeling a bit disregarded and a little bit kind of out of sync, I guess, with how other council members perhaps had more information or different information than what I have. I did not receive an invitation from you to meet, so I'm a little bit, that just puts me on a bad footing, I think, just right off the bat, so I'm a little bit upset about that. So
we just ask Mr. Collins how that came about?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Collins, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm surprised because I thought we reached out to all councillors. Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
Me, I did not receive an email. Yeah.
I asked us, my secretary, to reach out to all the councillors, and only certain councillors responded. So I thought that you didn't want to talk about it. So sorry. I would never not reach out to you. You know that because I've known you for years. So.
Well, that's why I'm a bit surprised. So, but thank you. So I have a number of questions. I would like to start with asking staff, what is the actual address of this application or parts of this application? Because there are so many different addresses being thrown around that I'm very confused. So I see 1561 on 5 different pages. I see 1558 on 4 different pages. I see 1554 on different pages. Even in the proponent's report, I see on page 107 they call it 1558 Prospect, and then on the very next page, on page 108, they call it 1561 York. I'm very confused, and the reason I'm confused is because, and the reason I want to ask this question is because I want to make sure that we have the right address in all of the information, because it's too easy then for somebody to come back and say, you said that was for 1562, but it's actually 1561. So is there an actual address that we're using?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. There'd be 4 addresses in total, obviously, at the end of the day here, so perhaps we can just...
Sorry, I'm talking about the address, which I think is the address on Prospect Place, which is the proponent's main house that I believe is supposed to be either 1561 or 1562 Prospect Place, but again, there's 4 different addresses in the documentation.
Sure. So, but let's just go through them all. There's 1 on Prospect and 3 on York. So can we just get those addresses cleared up?
Yes, thank you, through your worship. And Mr. Middleton, if you could pull up maybe one of the overall site plans that could assist us. But the Annandale House has the address of 1587 York Place. It exists currently as a duplex, and so there's a second York Place address associated with it, but I haven't been using that, I think, in any of my reports. Just for simplicity, I've been referring to it as 1587. And so that is the property, of course, in the lower left corner of this image we see. To the top of that image is the property that's currently known as 1562 Prospect Place, but this application has been in stream for a little while, and actually long enough for the address of that property to have changed. When the application was first made, it was addressed as 1561 Prospect Place. It's now 1562, and so any lingering references to 1561 are unfortunately errors on my part. I tried to change all of those 1561 references to 1562 Prospect Place. So there's a total of 3 addresses today, 2 for the Annandale House, which is a duplex, but I've just been referring to it as 1587 York, and then there's 1562 Prospect Place, which used to be 1561.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite.
I hope
Yeah,
that helps.
again, I mean, it's in all of the proponents' documentation as well, that it has totally different addresses. So I just want to make sure that we're, in our final documentation, that we actually call it 1562 Prospect, not 1561 York, not 1554 Prospect, or 1558 Prospect, or whatever.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Okay, so my next question is, in regards to the proposed duplex, I think that it looks like one of the variances that's been asked for is that it's 5 feet 8.5 inches higher than what is allowed in the bylaw. It goes from, am I reading that right? Is it that much higher, or is that much lower? I couldn't tell from the documentation in there.
Mr. McStravick.
Thank you, through your worship. I'm referring to the table on page 8 of 213. Lot 2 is the duplex. It's the second column from the left. The roof height is shown as 10.88 meters, which is 1.74 meters higher than what is currently permitted in the R2 zone. So that is about 6 feet or so. Yeah, so that's an increase from what's there currently.
Okay, so a 6 feet increase from, the, okay. Okay. Okay, so then my next question would be in regards to the covenant, and Councillor Green kind of brought that up a little bit as well. How good is a covenant that is written? I mean, I know that we have covenants that are able to be broken at any time, it seems, that have been made in the past, but would the covenant be a provincial covenant? Would it be a municipal covenant? What kind of a covenant would that be for the and I'm talking specifically to the price of the rents?
I guess this is probably the broader question is, would it be a covenant-based model, or would there be, are you looking at other models as well for that?
Thank you, through your worship. This is one of the details which we would iron out if council directed us to go down this path with the applicants, but it's very likely that there'd be a combination of a municipal covenant between the district of Oak Bay and the owners of that property, accompanied by a housing agreement bylaw, which would be put in place to establish whatever framework was determined appropriate to secure the appropriate level of affordability for those units into the future. And so, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And then just to Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, thank you for your explanation about the house that's already there on Lot 4, because we did get, and I'm sure that you saw it in the letters that we received, a letter from Ms. Grant, I think, and she had this rendition of a PDF that showed putting 4 units in the house that's already on lot 4, and then 2 units in lot 3, I guess, or sorry, 4 units in lot 3, 2 units in lot 2, and then that way you could have more of a street view of Annandale. And I thought that was really interesting, but as you've said now, that's something that can't be done because the house is already there on lot 3,
Yeah.
and it would not be.
And it's one story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, just let me have a look at my notes here. Yeah, I guess my other question is on that particular lot 3. Even though there's a house there right now, the provincial mandate says that there could be 4 units on that house. So that house could, in fact, even though it says in the documentation that it's only going to be a single-family dwelling, it could actually be increased to 4 units based on the provincial mandate. Correct?
I believe so, but if you get a chance to go by and have a look at the house or the garage, it's a pretty unique, interesting piece of architecture, and I don't think anyone's going to try and convert it into more than 1 unit. So I'd be shocked if they did.
Thank you. I have more questions, but I need to organize myself here, so I'll move on to someone else.
Sure, I'll occupy a moment of time here. Just going back, originally when this was put forward, there was some discussion as part of the designation of including some of the 4 sort of noteworthy internal architectural rooms. And I don't think that's currently included in there. Can you maybe just touch on that, about what the intention is with those internal spaces? Understanding it's being changed from a single-family home to a multi-family, but just curious about those, because there was some identified architectural features in those that were originally flagged as being worthy of including in the designation.
Yeah, the original application was a single-family house in Annandale, and so the intention was to retain quite a bit of the original interior detailing. But now that we're converting it, we're kind of like we're adding 2 more staircases, for instance, and it's getting cut up a lot, and it's going to be difficult to retain in their whole some of the stuff that we thought we could retain before. But we still have an intention to look at the den, for instance, has some really beautiful woodwork that we want to try and figure out a way that maybe we can use it somewhere in the house and retain it. And we still intend to maintain one of the fireplaces. It's like, I think it's at least 3 fireplaces and 1 chimney. And that we hope to at least keep the interior looking the same, whether it ends up being, we'll replace the chimney for sure. But whether those will end up becoming gas fireplaces or electric or something like that, we're not sure at this point, but at least we can retain the interior mantles and things like that are there.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there other questions of the applicant at this time? I don't have any. I think my questions are probably more, at this point, less about like the level of sort of granular detail of some things. The question in front of us tonight is whether or not this has enough merit to go out and seek broader public input. I'm just going to point out this is one of those cases where I think probably a bit unique in Oak Bay. It was a forced designation on this house, and it's within a heritage conservation area. It has a lot of public interest in this particular property. So definitely the public hearing process is appropriate if the council deems it has enough merit at this point to go forward and have that public input before things. So, Councillor Braithwaite, you
Yeah, actually, you reminded me that I did want to ask this question, and that would be a question to staff. Would it be advisable for us to send this back to Heritage to have another look at it? Because it's different than what it was the last time Heritage had a look at it.
I was ultimately a question for council, but perhaps Mr. Boel, you could talk to that in terms of our process.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you, that would be up to council to direct it back. The default process is to send it to Heritage Commission once, and usually that's how that goes with applications, unless there is made changes made earlier in the process. In this case, because the applicant has followed up on council direction and not so much the Heritage Commission's recommendations, but the council-specific direction. That's why it's spec'd for you today, but you do have the option to refer it back to the Heritage Commission for additional advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Just noting that the process is essentially, if it were to move forward to public hearing, that it would be, it's a general direction today that would trigger bylaw writing, finalization of many of the pieces. It would be certainly possible for us to include reference of this design back to Heritage as part of that, so there any additional notes could come back here. It doesn't necessarily have to be in series. We could do those in parallel, I would suggest, if there's interest in doing that. That would provide sort of a specialized part of public hearing that could come back as part of that piece, but ultimately up to council how we want to use the expertise of the Heritage Commission. Councillor Braithwaite, you still have the floor. Is there anything else? Okay. Councillor Watson.
I think that this has enough merit to go forward, and I'd be pleased to start by moving at least a motion for receipt of the staff report.
Definitely the non-controversial portion of the item. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? None opposed.
And then I would like to move the staff recommendations in the report, and I can read them out if you'd like.
Sure. Just before you do that, if I might, there's the first and that has staff draft a housing agreement bylaw and secure through it S219 covenant, the 2 rental suites. I just am curious, is that, because we talked about not knowing the exact mechanism by which the proposal would be enforced and so forth, is the wording of being specific to an S219 covenant appropriate? And then the mechanism for enforcement of the rental portion would be up in the air, and that doesn't have to be specified. I just want to make sure that the wording here isn't binding us to a process on some of those aspects that isn't the right process. Mr. McStravick?
Thank you, Your Worship. In my opinion, is that recommendation does give staff sufficient leeway to enter into those discussions with the applicant and fulfill that resolution to the best of our ability and bring it back for council consideration.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The conversations are all the different approaches. I want to make sure we didn't exclude something or include something that wasn't appropriate. Sorry, go ahead. Yes, you can move the...
Thank you for that, for clarifying that, Mayor. And yes, I will then move the staff recommendations as in the report that staff draft a Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw for the properties located at 1587 York Place and 1562 Prospect Place for consideration of first and second reading. That staff, do you want these one at a time, or will I do them as a package?
No, you can do the first two together,
Okay,
and then we'll deal with the public hearing direction. as a
That
separate
staff draft a housing agreement bylaw and secure through a Section 219 covenant the 2 rental suites proposed in Lot 2.
piece. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. You're welcome to speak to it. Probably worthwhile doing.
Yes, I'm happy to motivate for that. I want to say how pleased I am with the third iteration of this proposal that did, in my view, respond to each of council's requests. And I appreciate the time that the applicant has taken to try and find really sympathetic solutions for this site. It is a complex site. It's a very old, decrepit building that has value, and we want to retain it in the community. I think that the perfect solution that perhaps some in the community would like to see is that house frozen in time on the lot as it once was. That is no longer possible, and I think that the solution presented does a wonderful job of taking a precious piece of property and then making it usable in a 21st century context. I think some of the changes even in the adjoining lot for the duplex home are really also very attractive. I completely support the idea of moving the house. I do want to say that in echoing some of what we heard in the presentation, that our own heritage program review conducted by consultant Steve Barber, also in his own recommendations, the 29 recommendations that he gave to council, he himself, and I actually made a note of this, so he said that in guiding our own heritage program for the municipality, which at our last council meeting, we have taken steps to advance. One of his recommendations was that the District of Oak Bay maintain a certain amount of flexibility in applying heritage standards, since these solutions often involve compromises. So a standard that says you can't move a building we do require flexibility here, and we do require compromises in order to achieve a greater good. And I think that's been done very well with what we have in front of us. I think that having the property address the street in this way makes it really a wonderful new addition to the streetscape of York Place that has been lacking up until now. We will never be able to appreciate anymore what the original owners would have experienced in that house looking out to Mount Baker, and that's gone now, and we can't get it back. But we can create a very wonderful feeling of what that house offers by making it face York Place. So I support that entirely. I think this is a very good faith proposal, and a lot of time has already been taken to bring it to the state, and I think in the interests of all the things that we'll gain as a community, we should move this forward to public hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Watson.
That was another recommendation, but that's what
I understand. Well, there's definitely no approvals here tonight. This is just, does it meet the threshold of sufficiently good to go forward to public hearing? There is obviously work required from staff to draft the bylaws, and time and money investment. So we don't want to be moving this forward if it doesn't, have a chance of success going forward. But I do appreciate the comments, because that is the question here tonight: is should it go forward to a broader public comment? Councillor Patterson, did I have your hand?
No, just I certainly I commend Councillor Watson for her wise comments on this application, and I seconded it because I do think that the applicant has responded to some of the specifics that the council put before it at the last meeting. And I appreciate, and I think the community will appreciate, that the blasting for the duplex units will be reduced to what was originally planned. The tree planting, the collaboration between the parks and the applicant will be good. And when I look at this, and in particular the staff report, when it does highlight that this has been almost 3 decades of consideration of the best way to handle the dwelling unit itself and the land. And I think that this has been done to attempt to make best efforts to take the historic building and allow it to move forward into the future, still retained as housing, and with a nod to what its past has been, as well as providing much needed housing in walking distance to the village. And that meets a lot of our goals for the district. So I really think that this does merit moving forward now, so that we hopefully can get to some decision process and not take yet another decade of watching the house continue to deteriorate and not serving any useful purpose to the community other than contention within the neighborhood. So I would like to see us move this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much. And through you too, Mr. Collins, thank you for your comments and presentation, and to staff for their extensive report. This has been one of the most difficult decisions I have faced this term, to be honest, because it has been a contentious project. It has created some division in the local neighborhood. It has caused anxiety and angst for individuals. And I'm sorry about that, because these projects have the potential to be ones that build community and not divide community. And I'm hoping that perhaps this iteration, which I'm going to support tonight, will build that sense of community as opposed to dividing the community any further. That is my single goal, and I'm really hoping that people will take a look at this proposal. I don't think we're going to get one that is much better than this. It provides density, it provides housing options, it provides rental It provides ownership. And while the house is turned, we saw many examples of relocation, and all of those homes look to be thriving in their relocated situation. So I will support the motion, but it hasn't been an easy one. And in terms of a decision-making process, because I am a former Heritage Commission chair and member, and I value heritage a great deal. But I do think this provides an opportunity to save this house, reorient it, and be able to look at it for many, many decades to come. And if we talk about what does the future look like in Oak Bay, around the OCP, this is one of the sites that we are committing to the future, I think, and adapting it to the present as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Smart?
Yeah, thank you. I will also be supporting this application tonight, and I really appreciate how much the community has reached out to make sure this project is the best it can be. I know that there are some people that wanted more from this application, and I do feel like this project has reached that threshold of providing so much for our community, and that it's worth now having the public hearing. And I won't exhaust the points because I think the other councillors have mentioned them around the table, but how exciting to see this property potentially going forward, and this heritage building coming back to life. So I think there's a lot of excitement that potentially could take a turn in this project, but I think what's important now is that it has enough merit that we can have that community conversation.
Braithwaite?
Thanks so much. I just want to say thanks very much for the changes that you've made. I really like the design that you've done, Mr. Collins, with Zebra for the house with the suites. I think it's really more in keeping with the neighborhood. I like how the suites have been designed in the Annandale house, and that a chunk of it is not being ripped off. And I like how there's affordable housing being proposed, and I hope that that can definitely be realized. However, what I don't like is the rotation of Annandale, the moving forward of Annandale, the damage to the wall, the loss of so many trees. I think this is a great next step, but I don't think I don't think it's as good as it can get. I would like to send it back. Obviously, I'm going to be outvoted here, so I'm just going to continue speaking anyhow. I would like to send it back for more consideration before we'd move it to the public hearing. I think that. You know, you said in the beginning when you started talking, you said that the proponent was discouraged. Well, I'm discouraged too. I have a little bit of council fatigue, I think. I'm here to represent the people. I'm here to represent the majority of the people and what they want in our community. And I feel that I'm not able to do that if this moves forward at this point in time. You know, proponent relentlessness is not a criteria for acceptability of a project. And that's how I kind of feel right now. I feel like, you know, there's a tactic of like a creeping incrementalism. You know, like we agree on how something should be done, how to divide the pie. So we agree on the we agree on the rules of the HCA, we agree on the rules of the HRA, we agree on the rules of the OCP, but then the developer says, oh, but you know what, I need a little piece of this for that. And then he goes, oh, but I need a little piece of this for that. And oh, I need a little piece of this for that. And so then in the end, it's like we end up with everything on the developer side and nothing on the community side. And I don't think we're at that point for this particular proposal, but I feel a little bit like that. Like we've given and given and given, and we're saying, okay, yes, now you can turn it, and now, yes, you can do this, and now, yes, you can do that, but we're getting back a small amount compared to what the developer gets back. And that is bothersome for me. I really wish I could support this because I do like some of the other things that you have been involved in together. I think that some of those things are beautiful and you've done a great job. I want to be able to say that about this proposal as well, but at this point I can't. I personally, I know some people around the table have said that they felt that everything has been realized from what we asked for before, but I would like to say that, the intention of council's resolution with respect to lot 1, that the HRA be referred back to staff to work with the applicant to explore design options that reflect retention of Andale House in its existing location and redevelopment of the West Wing has been met. Yes, we met the redevelopment of the West Wing, but we didn't meet the existing location. And that was a real big thing for me, the existing location, and to move it forward. And so we don't get, you get a different view of it from the street, and the only reason we're moving it forward is to add more land onto the property that's behind it. And do they really need more land on that property behind it? Could we not have kept that green space for Annandale? So all of those things that come into my decision making around this. So again, love a lot of what has happened in this proposal, but I'm not at this point prepared to move it on to public hearing, because I would like to see it come back with just a few more tweaks, because I think it could be just that little bit better. And I don't want to see that, that creeping incrementalism that I talked about come into it. I want to be able to say, this is a great project that we all can be proud of within our community. Maybe we'll end up that way and I'll have to eat my words, but right now I need to speak for the rest of the community, and I think that a lot of people in the community would support having it go back for another look. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. If you feel like there's something specific to it, you can make an amendment motion to make some changes here if you wish to move it forward with one or two changes. It's a bit awkward, I appreciate it.
It's awkward because I know that everybody around the table is going to vote for the proposal, so I'm pretty sure I wouldn't get a second. So,
well, all you can do is try, if that's the will. Okay, thank you for those comments. And I always like to remember that we're all open-minded, so if there's good cases to be made, then that's the job here. Although I think we've heard around the table that there's general support for this to go forward to public hearing. I just do want to acknowledge, I'll support the motion that's here. I agree that it meets the threshold of going forward. It's imperfect. I think what we've the reality of this kind of application is that unfortunately, the financial realities of redevelopment is difficult. Moving things around within a lot is difficult. I would still like to see a few things that don't make my checklist. That being said, I think what we've had is a back and forth 3 times. I do believe this is really, the best proposal that we're going to get from the applicant. I think they're making and I do think we're essentially at that point. If council's not satisfied with that, then we're perfectly justified to decline it. But even if that was the case, I think, given the really significant importance of this project, and I mentioned at the beginning of this, it really is a community asset. Appreciate it's a private property, but it is a community asset in the sense that it was designated, it's recognized, it's got national historical significance, it's got lots of things in it that are important. I think if we don't do the service to the community of going and speaking to the community and understanding and laying out what's being proposed here before we make our decision, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that either. So I'm comfortable with the process that we're going to move it forward at this point. I'm very much looking forward to what we hear from the community. I'm sure there's often some wisdom that comes forward from the community that we haven't heard before, but I think it's time now at this point to take what we've been offered and proposed and take it forward for that public input. I think that concludes my comments, and so back to you, Councillor Green, for a second time speaker. Yeah,
just a quick question. We talked about involving the Heritage Commission at some stage. You mentioned something about simultaneous. So I just wanted clarity on that, because I think, it should be shared with the Heritage Commission as well. And then you said they could comment later in the process, I think.
Yes. I guess procedural question. I'm just cognizant of time. We need to extend the meeting here by 10 minutes just so we can make sure we get through it all.
Move to extend the meeting by 10 minutes, till 10:10.
10:10, okay. Moved and seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? Procedurally here, if the desire of council was just to say, let's, as part of the information package, coming back with the bylaws, that we include that give the Heritage Commission a chance to make any additional comments, that would go forward in the package. It would really be coming back to the package for the public hearing. Would that be part of this this motion, or should we do that as essentially a motion arising that this also be referred to the Heritage Commission and their comments be included back? My feeling here is probably better as a motion arising.
Yeah, I think
separate from the
it may
process.
make sense because the bylaws will need to come back for first and second reading prior to that public hearing anyway. So if council chooses to give first and second reading at a subsequent meeting and then refer the bylaws essentially to the Heritage Commission for their review and comment prior to then the actual public hearing taking place, that's how I probably see it happening.
Okay. Just for my clarification, though, I don't, Mr. Boel, Mr. Green, I'm just thinking here, realistically, we don't necessarily get Heritage Commission commentary on bylaws. So it maybe make more sense to just include the proposal referral, and then those comments could come back here. And if there were some tweaks that we wanted to add, make changes to the bylaws prior to going to public hearing, that would give us that chance at that point, is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, we could just simply refer this item to the Heritage Commission so that they, essentially, we could either go to the next Heritage Commission meeting. Essentially, this report that you've reviewed tonight could be reviewed by the Heritage Commission for the
so
review and comments.
Procedure-wise, and Councillor Green, to answer your question, I think what my recommendation here is going to be, let's deal with the motion that's on the floor, and then as a motion arising, ask staff to refer this this proposal back to Heritage and have their comments be included in the package that comes back with first and second reading. Thank you. Okay. So just on the motion that's on the floor in front of us here, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillor Braithwaite opposed. That carries. I'm going to then have the last piece of this, which is that staff schedule a public hearing.
Yes, I'd like to move that motion, that staff schedule a public hearing for the proposed Heritage Revitalization Agreement bylaw for 1587 York Place and 1562 Prospect Place.
Okay, moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on that? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? And then a motion. Oh, sorry, Councillor Braithwaite opposed. And then just take a motion here from Councillor Green, and I'll, if you don't mind, I'll try and help with this one. I don't mind. Just also that this proposal application package be referred to Heritage Commission, and that their comments be included in the package back with the with first and second reading. Okay. Second. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion required on that, Councillor Watson?
I just have a question about it. I think it is one important courtesy to send that back to the Heritage Commission. But I wanted to make sure that it doesn't add any time to the process. And so that's a question of staff. If we have this referral, how would it affect the timelines for moving this forward to public hearing?
Thank you, through your worship. There are several items which need to be worked on still before this comes back for first reading, and so I don't think that taking it back to the Heritage Commission would necessarily add anything to the timeline.
Thank you.
And just for absolute clarity here, I read this motion as referring the application that's here today over to the Heritage Commission, so no additional work required to go there. It's really just to go there, and if there's an additional comments, those can be included in the package when it comes back to us. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you, Councillor Green. Any other motions arising on this matter before we move it on? Okay, thank you. We have nothing else in the scheduled agenda. Is there any new business? Moved adjournment. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. Going once, going twice. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. Thank you very much, everyone.